This young man was at the bottom of society the moment he was born. Empty-handed and penniless with no power or influence, he generally had nothing. But a life-changing opportunity suddenly appeared before his eyes when the game Epoch was launched. Lam Kiat tirelessly grinded day and night to climb to the top of the leaderboard. He was just one step away from the glorious throne. The fated moment had arrived. In the arena, Immortal War King Lam Kiat, representing the warrior class, would face Bachelor Chuangdan, the server's top swordsman. With outstanding ability and a perfectly executed skill set, Lam Kiat attacked smoothly without revealing a single opening. Every deadly slash hit the opponent's weak points. He fought like an assassin from hell. On the other side of the battlefield, Bachelor was clearly at a disadvantage. His protective armor was quickly shattered, leaving him with no strength left to resist. Bachelor's sword was shattered to pieces by Lam Kiat's attack. His life points had also been depleted to the maximum. Viewers and commentators alike unanimously cheered the name of the new king about to be crowned. He calmly carried the greatsword on his shoulder and walked up to his opponent. With a friendly, triumphant smile, he held out his hand, intending to help his opponent up, and said, "It seems victory is mine this time. Have I truly failed?" Bachelor tried to swallow a mouthful of saliva mixed with the metallic taste of blood. But then he let out a sinister laugh, thinking to himself that he absolutely could not afford to lose. How could he possibly fall here? Once I use that trump card, all your efforts will be nothing but a joke. In a flash, the broken weapon in his hand automatically restored itself and its power increased manifold. The item's permanent durability retention feature had been activated, and the cost for one use of that skill was 50,000 yuan. Lam Kiat stood stunned, looking at the scene before him. Oh my god, this Bachelor brazenly topped up his account to win right in the middle of the final match. While he was still collecting himself, his opponent rushed straight towards him, closing in. Lam Kiat immediately composed himself to swing his weapon in defense. But it seemed the tide of the battle had now completely turned. He was still too naive. Did you really think hard work alone could change your fate? Someone poor like you will never understand. Bachelor's words were filled with arrogance. But then everything happened so quickly that Lam Kiat didn't even have time to register his opponent's move. This was all thanks to Bachelor, who boldly spent an additional 900,000 yuan to instantly activate the instant teleportation technique. Immediately he suddenly appeared behind Lam Kiat. He then splurged another 1,200,000 yuan to activate his ultimate blow. Immediately after that moment, Bachelor's sharp blade pierced through Lam Kiat's chest. A blazing red notification appeared before his eyes like a cold death sentence ringing out, "You have been defeated by Bachelor Chuangdan. All data for this account will be permanently deleted and assets transferred to the victor." Lam Kiat painfully gritted his teeth, unable to believe he would meet such a bitter end. In that moment of collapse, he still clung to a shred of fading consciousness to demand answers from his opponent. "Why did you betray me? Answer me quickly. Why would you rather cheat just to bring me down? Why did you cast aside our vows? I'm truly sorry, Lam Kiat. Let's be brothers in the next life." Bachelor didn't bother to explain much, merely uttering a bland apology before decisively delivering another fatal blow, forever denying him the chance to turn the tables. The notification panel before Lam Kiat's eyes unexpectedly changed again. The text clearly showed that he had been officially disqualified from competing. Realizing his body was slowly turning to dust, Lam Kiat bitterly accepted the cruel truth that he had lost in a profoundly frustrating way. Clearly, with just one more step, he could have reached the pinnacle of glory in this era. In this match, he had even staked his very life. Yet in the end, he was left with nothing but bitter resentment due to an insidious dirty trick from his enemy. Lam Kiat told himself that if heaven granted him a chance to be reborn, he would seize that kingship at all costs. "Warning, your account has been wiped out." These were the last words that faded from Lam Kiat's sight. Then, for some unknown reason, he suddenly woke up, the sharp, piercing pain as if a sword had just run through his chest still lingering, making his breathing rapid. As soon as he opened his eyes slightly, Lam Kiat saw his chest heaving and his breath still intermittent. After looking around for a moment, he was astonished to realize he was sprawled out in the middle of his familiar bedroom. "Hey, big brother, why are you suddenly sprawling on the floor like that? Are you practicing playing a dead body?" A shrill voice echoed down from above, making Lam Kiat start and look up, his eyes widening in surprise as he saw none other than Tich, his younger sister. 3 years ago, she had fallen into a deep coma after a traffic accident. Without the expensive life support system in the intensive care unit, she would hardly have survived, which was why Lam Kiat had to spend every last penny he earned from grinding in games to cover her hospital bills. Yet now, the girl was standing right before his eyes in flesh and blood with a very sassy demeanor. Lam Kiat shot up, frantically grabbing his sister's shoulders and shaking her vigorously. "Are you okay? Aren't you still motionless in a hospital bed?" This strange behavior made Tich's eyes widen with confusion. She immediately pushed her brother down onto the floor, then jumped onto his neck and rained punches on him. Is this clueless big brother short-circuited or something? Who was the one who stayed up all night waiting for the server to open? Lam Kiat suddenly became extremely confused when his younger sister pretended not to remember what he had just said. The young man asked the girl again, bewildered, still thinking he had misheard about sitting up all night waiting for the server to open. Although she didn't understand why her brother made such a strange statement, Tich still honestly reported, Today is the open beta day for K-Gon Online, silly brother. The girl's words were like adding fuel to the fire, making Lam Kiat want to curse. He knew he had been reborn 5 years ago on June 22nd and instinctively clutched his chest. The place where Bachelet's sword had pierced had once driven him to extreme despair, blaming his cruel fate for taking everything away. Who would have thought that the scales of destiny would suddenly tilt completely in his favor? This life, this game, everything had a chance to start over. Lam Kiat sat down on the ground, his emotions a mix. Even though he had failed once, he had another chance to try again. Since he had this opportunity, Lam Kiat swore he would climb to the peak of K-Gain at all costs, and at the same time, settle the debts from his previous life fair and square. He secretly calculated that the savings from 3 years of hard grinding, plus a high-interest loan of 100,000 from the loan sharks, would be enough to buy a fancy gaming helmet and start over. That object, which looked much like a motorcycle helmet, turned out to be the virtual reality helmet for the game K-Gain. With the passage of time, this game, existing in parallel with the real world, had created a global sensation. K-Gain opened up an endless universe of mysteries and breathtaking beauty, and everyone was captivated by this ultimate virtual reality experience. In the previous life of K-Gain, Lam Kiat was famous by the nickname Immortal War God. Thanks to his sharp intellect and relentless effort, coupled with ordinary equipment and superior skills, he had gradually conquered every challenge. Everyone praised him as a talented player, and in just a short time, Lam Kiat had become a household name among professional gamers. That battle should have led Lam Kiat to achieve the title of the strongest. Who would have thought he would be betrayed by his closest friend, Bachelet Truongthan? Perhaps he, too, was blinded by that title. Lam Kiat truly wondered when his betrayal plan had begun. But now those things no longer mattered. It was better to seize this precious opportunity to change his fate. And so, he quickly put the gaming helmet on his head, and a flash of light appeared before his eyes, bringing him into the mesmerizing virtual world. Just like in his previous life, the first thing after rebirth was to choose a profession. Previously, the official K-Gain Online helmet had never released any guides or reviews. Therefore, all players entered this world with complete uncertainty, discovering everything on their own. But for Lam Kiat, a veteran gamer of 5 years, K-Gain held almost no more secrets for him. Developing strength and exploring the map would be much easier. This was his biggest advantage in this life. Returning to his second life, Lam Kiat had resolved to complete the unfinished tasks from his previous life. Of course, the most important thing was to reach the pinnacle in the game, to become the strongest, and no one could dispute that. The master of techniques am back. This time, returning to the novice village, Lam Kiat was no longer a clueless novice like in his previous life. It was just that the gazes of the other players when they saw him were truly hard to describe. Oh my, it's this year already and there are still warrior class players. They must have hit their head somewhere. Even a puppy wouldn't bother to look at this poorest class on earth. He doesn't even have a single blunt sword, yet he struts around like a tycoon. Who is this dirt poor guy showing off to? Lin Jae, however, acted as if he were deaf to the heap of gossip around him. In the end, the young man still embarked on the same old beaten path. Accepting to be a warrior who possesses super pathetic initial stats. Memories flooded back. Lin Jae remembered 2 years ago when he was chatting with Bai Li. He had once asserted that even if he were to be reborn again, he would still settle on this class, leaving Bai Li extremely bewildered at that time, because he believed that only foolish novices would choose to be warriors. A dirt poor bunch who can't afford good gear, don't know how to use flashy magic, and must use their tough bodies as meat shields on the front lines. To put it bluntly, these guys are born only to endure beatings. If you want to taste what it's like to be the strongest here, just do as I did and become a swordsman, both elegant and quick to finish off enemies. Bai Li asserted this firmly, but Lin Jae still placed his full faith in the potential of warriors, those who possess a tenacity like a hungry leech, and become crazier the more they are tormented, constantly struggling through adversity to survive tenaciously. That is the true quality of an undefeated god of war, an exclusive title reserved for the survivor of 1,000 life and death battles. But can that flashy title be kept until tomorrow? Bai Li asked skeptically. Hard to say. How about a little bet for fun? This time back I will definitely reign supreme. Ending his train of thought, Lin Jae found himself standing in the beginner village. Though dirt poor, thanks to the warrior's innate high health pool, low-level monsters would not easily defeat him. What's more, when finished, players also have the opportunity to upgrade this class to a new height. This was the core point he had targeted in his past life. Warriors have the ability to trade health for extreme damage. Those rich, spoiled young masters only like classes with massive damage or a handsome appearance, such as mages, swordsmen, hunters, or knight assassins. Consequently, 9 out of 10 people on the street belong to this group, who like to show off their physical strength or magic. However, the early game monsters are absurdly strong. Those others would likely be knocked out before they could even show off their moves, whereas warriors are extremely sturdy thanks to their excellent ability to take hits. At the same time, the weaknesses of this class could be completely compensated for by Lin Jae's wealth of combat experience. Before long, the first challenge, named the Novice Challenge, officially began. The quest required Lin Jae to report to the outlet in Mel Town after 5 minutes. This is the NPC who guides beginners. His serious expression is completely out of place with his ragged clothes. Lin Jie suddenly felt a surge of nostalgic emotions. It was a surprise to meet this humorous senior again. Before he could open his mouth to greet him, he heard someone shouting loudly from behind, "Hey, you piece of trash, how dare you bump into this young master?" When he looked up, he encountered a level 2 paladin named Palai, who was raising his chin and demanding a 1-coin toll in the name of the Supreme Light. Otherwise he would block the road. He rambled on that this was the trendiest class for big spending pay-to-win players in the early days, a well-rounded profession ranging from punching and kicking to healing and crowd control. It was surprising that even though the new server had only been running for 30 minutes, this guy Palai had already jumped to level 2, surely using the familiar tricks that had been embarrassingly exposed on online forums. As soon as he finished creating his character, he spent money to buy rookie experience point packs right away. Next, he used his level advantage to bully the weaker players and set up an illegal toll booth for protection money. Palai's smug and arrogant face was incredibly annoying to look at, but Lin Jie knew very well that people of this sort actually had no knowledge about the game at all. Even the protective gear on his body was a pathetic patchwork. To put it bluntly, he was just a hollow paper tiger. A rookie's starting gift was only a meager 10 coins in their pocket, so even if he only extorted a single spare coin, he would still make a huge profit. Even if it was just a single spare silver coin, he was not foolish enough to give it away for nothing. "Why should I pay tribute to you?" he asked coldly. Perhaps this was the first time Palai had encountered a stubborn person who dared to talk back, and his voice immediately shrieked piercingly, "Because I am stronger than you. Go back, delete your account, and start over from scratch, you idiot." As soon as he finished speaking, Palai's hand quickly moved to the hilt of his sword, but just as the steel blade was about to slip out of the scabbard, his wrist was gripped tightly by Lin Jie like a vise. His muscular strength was so superior that no matter how the other guy struggled, he was left helplessly bound. This was originally a basic passive of the fighter class called Grip Enhancement, whose initial purpose was merely to reduce the chance of dropping weapons during combat. But at this moment, he applied it skillfully to completely neutralize Palai's resistance. A hand-strength utility skill. Palai's eyes widened in astonishment. Could it be that useless talent that nobody cares about, the one that only helps hold the sword tightly? Ignoring his rambling screams, Lin Jie tightened his grip even further, even though in the eyes of the majority, it was just a useless skill. To him it was the ultimate weapon. With just a little more pressure from him, Palai's sword dropped straight to the ground. The once aggressive and domineering man could now only whimper in sorrow as he watched Lin Jie disarm him of his protective weapon with bare hands. This was indeed a miraculous effect beyond imagination for the grip utility move that had been looked down upon for so long. A special ability that had always been shunned and underestimated by the player community. The strength of this crowd control effect would be directly proportional to the physical stats accumulated later on. As long as your muscle stats exceeded those of the enemy, snatching weapons from their hands would become incredibly simple. Currently, even though Lin Jie was only at level 1, he still disarmed Palai easily, which proved that the level 2 Paladin's strength was even weaker than a novice's. He hadn't even allocated a single potential point to his physical attack attribute, truly a foolish guy lacking basic knowledge. In addition, except for Lin Jie, nobody realized that when upgraded to a higher tier, this grip-enhancing talent would unleash terrifying power, turning into one of the most overpowered moves of the class. After evolving successfully, it would upgrade to Titan's Strength, a legendary ultimate skill that allows players to wield a dragon-slaying greatsword which normally requires 2 hands with just 1 hand. Nevertheless, the prerequisite to achieve this divine transformation was that the player had to choose the correct grip reinforcement ability right from the character creation step. While Lin Jie was lost in thought, the surrounding crowd suddenly parted to make way for the appearance of several patrolling guards. Seeing his saviors, Palai yelled and wailed from behind to complain, "You are finished this time. If you dare to disturb the peace in a safe zone, the guards will execute you on the spot. I swear in the name of the light." This guy Lin Jie openly assaulted someone right in front of everyone. He is the culprit. And yet he still maintained an extremely calm attitude. Although the spear-wielding patrol squad in the starting village had more than enough power to quickly take down and eliminate low-level novices, he still straightforwardly admitted that he was the one who punished Palai. Witnessing that scene, the other guy immediately grinned with glee, smugly saying that he had confessed, so they should quickly and ruthlessly punish him. "In fact, this is just legitimate self-defense," the young man surnamed Lin continued, skillfully explaining every detail of the story. Therefore, the guards suddenly changed their minds, pointing their spears straight at the other guy, making him freeze in shock as he saw danger approaching. The guy trembled violently, his mind blank because he had spent hundreds of millions of dong to buy a premium newbie gift pack. It would be truly bitter if his account were banned now. However, machines are still machines, and the system characters just act according to the ironclad rules. Anyone who causes trouble in a safe zone will be punished immediately, whereas those who punish the instigator, no matter how ruthless they are exempted from blame and even receive a generous compensation. The young man understood this loophole all too well, which explained why his face remained completely unbothered when the patrol squad arrived. Sure enough, as expected, the aggressor quickly learned a lesson he would never forget. As for our protagonist, he pocketed a gold coin in compensation from the system. The defeated guy was so furious that he saw stars. Meanwhile, the onlookers, who had intensely disliked the young man before, upon witnessing this peak turn of the tables, all told each other to stay far away to be safe. Stuffing the earned gold coin into his pocket, the young man leisurely strolled away from the crowd. Earlier, his conversation with old Alex had been interrupted by that guy. Now he returned to the old man's place and casually sat down on the chair, greeting his old friend Alex, whom he hadn't met in a long time. The old man's wrinkled face showed clear astonishment, and he asked where the young man had gotten that information when this server had only been open for exactly 1 day. They were not simple acquaintances but had been soulmates since 5 years ago. Yet old Alex only thought this was a harmless joke from a newcomer. Without overthinking it, the old man proceeded with the standard procedure of giving the newbie starter gift, presenting 3 options from which only one could be chosen: 10 coins, 3 minor health recovery potions, or a basic iron sword reserved for the warrior class. The surrounding crowd whispered that only a fool would pass up the cash, especially for a dirt-poor warrior, as those 10 coins had a black market exchange value of up to hundreds of millions. However, the young man took a different path by searching for the 4th gift, a secret that, in his previous life, had taken players 3 whole years to accidentally unearth from this beginner quest. Old Alex looked dumbfounded while the curious onlookers nearby began to mock him as crazy or delusional, claiming there was no such thing as a hidden gift here. Yet, in the face of his scrutiny, he calmly whispered the mysterious line, "The fire before dawn will fade twice." "No way. How do you know that secret?" The old man's expression changed, filled with shock. When the dark moon dissolves into the endless night, old memories will rise from the cracks of time, so that from the cold ashes, a spark will burst forth, marking the collapse of the old mythology and opening a new chapter of history. The young man slowly followed up with a question, recalling the security code that the old man had once entrusted to him. His memory took him back to 5 years ago in his previous life. Back then, the young man had excellently completed the challenge of rescuing Alex's family from the clutches of wild beasts. The old man back then had been so moved that tears streamed down his face, and he confessed that he was just a low-level system guide, so he had no valuable treasures to properly repay his benefactor. However, no matter how slim the chance, if you ever face difficulties in the future and need my help, you just have to recite this password. Even if this identity changes, leaving no trace for the system to recognize me, I will still remember you forever, the benefactor who saved my life. It turned out that what Lam Kiat had just said was the secret code Alex had revealed to him in his past life. A flash of surprise crossed his eyes, but it immediately returned to composure. Outlet, of course, did not retain any memories of his past life, but at this moment he sensed that Lam Kiat was an extremely important figure to him. So the condition to trigger the hidden quest was naturally met. As for Lam Kiat, he had indeed activated the 4th reward package, not some trivial item for rookies, but a special reward reserved only for returning players. In his past life, Lam Kiat was just 1 step away from reaching the pinnacle of power, but unfortunately he fell due to underhanded, unfair tactics, even though he knew that in this world, injustice is a common occurrence. But he firmly refused to accept that. With that thought, Lam Kiat decisively chose that 4th reward package, and immediately an origin talent stone was held firmly in his hand. This item would grant him an additional talent, which was indeed a pleasant surprise. The surrounding crowd time and time again gasped in amazement at Lam Kiat, with everyone exclaiming, "Isn't he that the talent selection gem? Each account can only bind a talent once at the beginning. This is such an extremely rare item that no matter how much money is thrown at it, it cannot be acquired." Lam Kiat clenched the gemstone in his palm, resolving that in this life, he must reach the position of the strongest, and to do that, he had to get the very best starting from the get-go. Accepting this hidden quest was the very first step, upon which whether his destiny would change depended, so Lam Kiat immediately used the stone, choosing the Oath of the Sword as his second talent without the slightest hesitation. Outlet explained that the Oath of the Sword was a renowned talent, created by the legendary sword Saint Casimil. Anyone on this path would become a sword sworn, possessing superhuman swordsmanship, but in return, they could only use swords to fight for the rest of their life. Seeing this as a significant limitation, he needed to confirm once more whether Lam Kiat was truly firm in his choice. "Of course, absolutely," the young man replied confidently. Just a moment ago, Lam Kiat had made many eyes burn with envy, yet only moments later, this very decision turned him into a laughingstock for the entire crowd. Thus, whispers and gossip broke out again, murmuring, "Haha, look at that, he dares to choose the Oath of the Sword. Who in this day and age is still foolish enough to choose swordsmanship as their second talent, and then choose a low-tier weapon, confidently bragging about mastering it? What a complete newbie." Completely unlike the noisy crowd, Alet had no intention of criticizing Lam Kiat's choice. He casually asserted that the most powerful weapon is not actually the sword, but the person who wields it. Because of that, Alet firmly believed that a steadfast person like him would surely achieve great things. After expressing his gratitude, Lam Kiat also quickly departed. In his past life, it was not until level 30 that he was lucky enough to possess a second talent, yet in this life, when everything had only just begun, he had already obtained it. Now, his combat power had reached an astonishing level, allowing him to level up rapidly, shortening the distance to the throne of the strongest by a long stride. The early advantages enjoyed by pay-to-win players would quickly vanish after level 5, and those who chose a finance-oriented playstyle from the start, if they wanted to maintain their advantage, would have no choice but to continuously pour massive amounts of money into the game. However, free-to-play players who relied solely on skill to level up like him were the most stable and enduring. For them, even a crude iron sword was enough to create miracles. Swords inherently did not possess the devastating raw power of axes, nor the overwhelming suppression of spears, and could not compare to the unique benefits provided by staves. Yet, other than him, who would realize that an ordinary sword is actually the weapon that demands the most skillful and refined handling of all. In his past life, Lam Kiat chose the grip strength enhancement talent right from the start, then quickly bought himself an iron sword and immediately rushed out to battle, beginning his journey of monster slaying and leveling up. But in this life, thanks to having the origin talent stone from Alex, Lam Kiat had accidentally bypassed the crude iron sword, with the result that he was now empty-handed, without any weapon whatsoever. That also meant if the choices in this life diverged onto a different path, the course of the story would surely change completely. And once the story diverged, perhaps the ending would not be the same as before either. In Lam Kiat's mind, a name suddenly surfaced clearly: Bach Lai. He told himself that before having the chance to meet that person again, he must train himself to become many times stronger. The bitter end he had to endure in his past life must be completely overturned in this lifetime. Lam Kiat then made his way toward a beginner weapon stall located modestly by the roadside. A few curious bystanders around were also inquisitively leaning in to watch. However, in their eyes, this pile of items was no different from scrap metal. On the contrary, Lam Kiat still calmly stepped forward. He picked up a piece of rotten wood labeled as a low-level weapon to take a look. This crude item hadn't even been polished. Despite being called a weapon, its damage was a mere 1 point. Its only use was to swing wildly, so it should have been called a club, but strangely, the system interface displayed it as both a sword and a staff. This strange detail immediately sparked a highly interesting hypothesis in Lam Kiat's mind. Please go easy on me, guys. I am just a free-to-play grinder trying to make a living with this pile of groceries, the poor vendor pleaded earnestly. But those arrogant guys continued to vandalize and swear loudly. If you're a grinder who's too cowardly to fight, what's the point of playing? Go home and play with toys. Looking at your furtive face makes my eyes itch. Though he usually didn't like getting involved in others' business, Lam Kiat felt annoyed by their arrogance and decided to step forward. Blacksmiths or merchants are also players, who is superior to whom to act so high and mighty. Without chefs, what would they eat? And without blacksmiths forging swords, those warrior generals wouldn't dare poke their faces out of the village gate. Having said that, Lam Kiat turned and quietly asked the vendor how much this crude piece of wood cost. The man was stunned for a moment before muttering that it was just a copper coin. Naturally, the guy who had just been scolded looked grim with resentment. He demanded to know who he was, to which Lam Kiat calmly claimed to be a warrior. Needless to say, the group immediately burst into laughter. A warrior buying a dry piece of wood was truly the joke of the century. But Lam Kiat didn't bother to argue. He pulled out a gold coin he had just earned and tossed it to the seller to claim the item. He was about to turn and leave, but the other guy wouldn't let it go so easily without venting all his anger. He sullenly blocked the path, believing that Lam Kiat had just ruined his heroic deed. Looking at his arrogant behavior, Lam Kiat almost burst out laughing, because the guy's so-called good deed was actually nothing more than bullying the weak. What a foolish warrior, getting scammed but still acting nonchalant. Even if that piece of rotten wood were lying on the street, only dogs would take it, who would bother to pick it up. Yet you spent a whole gold coin to buy it. That vendor is definitely a con artist. Indeed, the clever vendor had already quickly packed up his stall and slipped away unnoticed. The arrogant guy didn't bother to linger with a fool either. He sneered, thinking he deserved to be scammed, and then led his entourage straight away. In fact, no one would even look at this item even if it were given away for free. But naive and inexperienced newbies were easily lured into the trap by the ultra-cheap price of 1 coin. Therefore, trash equipment antique stalls sprang up like mushrooms to trick newbies, giving them the feeling of getting a great bargain, which was a classic trick in the early days of the era. But Lam Kiat was no amateur. The expertise of a war god who had handled tens of thousands of ancient artifacts allowed him to sense the difference. This crude wooden stick actually harbored the divine power of both a sword and a staff. The game system's identification mechanism would never allow such a silly bug to happen, unless this was actually a hidden treasure that had not been properly valued. Even though he couldn't decipher it right now, Lam Kiat still casually brandished it like a sharp weapon. The very moment Lam Kiat obtained his first treasure in this world, the system activated a global quest named Monster Invasion, requiring all new players to join forces to defend the borders of Meltown against the demons, and closely guard the energy crystal right in the central square. Lam Kiat knew all too well that Meltown was located right at the hotspot of the era's warfare, where frequent natural disasters caused second-tier demons with terrifying strength to continuously pour out from the north. In his previous life, just 1 year after the game launched, this beautiful land of Mel had completely evaporated from the map because it could not withstand the sweep of the demon army. Those knave rookies had no idea of the impending disaster. They were still excitedly preparing to hunt monsters to level up and gain experience points. Amidst the bustling crowd heading towards the northern battlefield, there was also the figure of Lam Kiat. The guards immediately put up a barrier, making the excuse that no matter how urgent the matter was, they couldn't let a rookie head to the north gate and throw their life away for nothing. They warmly advised him to return to the other 3 gates and clear out the weak monsters first. However, Lam Kiat resolutely refused, saying it wasn't necessary and to just open the way for him. Stepping out of the town means losing all novice protection. The gatekeeper still tried to dissuade him. "Alright, I'll go find some enemies on my own level myself." He spoke casually, even though he wouldn't be afraid even if the opponents had vastly superior levels. Seeing Lam Kiat so determined, the guard could only click his tongue and pull the gate open. At that very moment, the system's notification went off, announcing that Lam Kiat had received 100 reputation points in Meltown due to his extremely courageous action, officially reaching the friendliness milestone. The game era had an excellent hidden rule to encourage players to push their limits. As long as an NPC believed you were embarking on a crazy challenge, their favorability would soar, unlocking juicy hidden quest lines. Just as Lam Kiat calculated, a gatekeeper immediately ran over in a hurry. "Please wait a moment. If you are so determined, young man, could you grant me a small favor, O reckless adventurer?" The screen immediately popped up a notification of successfully activating the sub-quest named the Captain's Request. This was originally a challenge reserved for players of level 3 and above, and even though Lam Kiat was currently only at a measly level 1, everything was fully within his calculations. "Some of my comrades are trapped in the lair of the boss, the Chanting Griffin. I beg you to help bring their bodies back so we can hold a proper funeral," the captain pleaded. However, Lam Kiat's intention was far from just retrieving corpses. Risking his life to hunt high-level monsters always brought extremely generous rewards, and could even change the fate of the entire town of Mel. Thinking of this, Lam Kiat smiled and replied, "What you need to prepare is absolutely not a memorial service, Captain Lance. How do you know my name?" The man opposite him looked utterly astonished and quickly asked, "I will personally go to eradicate the Chanting Griffin to save your comrades as well as this entire Mel region. You might as well get ready to prepare the victory feast," Lam Kiat replied with great charisma. He knew very well how formidable his enemy was, the famous rookie killer boss. To completely clear this stage, that boss had to fall at the hands of someone with a level far below the requirement, which was why Lam Kiat had to keep his level at the absolute bottom before accepting the quest. Although keeping his level low heavily reduced his damage output, thanks to his superb skills and thorough understanding of the boss mechanics, he was more than capable of crushing a god-level creature right from level 1. It was just that this secret could not be revealed to anyone, and even if he did, they would just think he was crazy. As expected, upon hearing that Lam Kiat wanted to hunt the griffin, Lance frantically tried to stop him. "That's impossible unless a miracle happens. Just complete your part, then lie low and wait for the Chanting Griffin to leave, and that will be the end of it. You can sleep easy because I am that miracle." Lam Kiat's voice rang out with the pride of a master. That confidence was no boast, because in this life he would personally tilt the scales of fate entirely in his favor. Just stepping through the city gate, the smell of blood rushed straight into his nose, making Lam Kiat involuntarily scowl and furrow his brows. Thinking back, Era was famous for being a super difficult game, containing countless ways for the designer to troll the players. But even though it tormented players like that, the gigantic rewards still made players all over the planet rush in headfirst. Ahead of Lam Kiat, a few groups of players had gone out to farm monsters early. In contrast to his solitary figure, they were all in crowded parties. Forming a party was obviously the optimal choice for ordinary players, but there was no way Lam Kiat was such a mediocre player. He intended to ignore them and just pass by, but unexpectedly he suddenly heard a familiar voice. "Oh look, isn't he that the idiot who was just scammed earlier? How is it? Do you still have your precious piece of firewood, little brother? Look guys, it turns out to be that clueless guy standing in front of the weapon shop earlier." Lam Kiat didn't bother to lower himself to this kind of person, only leaving behind 2 bland words before moving on. However, these brats had no intention of letting him go so easily. One of them immediately rushed out to block Lam Kiat's path, sizing him up from head to toe and nitpicking in every way. Well, is that young man carrying a chicken to hunt monsters all by himself? Looking at his tattered guild uniform is enough to know his skill is garbage. In a bit, when he is gasping for air, he will surely cry and beg to be carried. The whole group also openly showed their contempt for Lam Kiat, because the young man was both at the novice level and clutching a blunt wooden stick. Bringing him along would only make him a heavy burden, not doing any good. Lam Kiat was too lazy to argue, so he just let out a soft sigh. Although joining others reduced risk, the loot would be split significantly, whereas going solo and taking down a monster would net him 5 times the reward of a group run, so why would he not go for it? In short, once one's skill is enough to carry the team, gathering teammates only gets in the way. Lam Kiat intended to quicken his pace and walk ahead, but that knight reached out, planning to grab him by the collar. Who would have thought that he himself would be thrown backward in embarrassment, despite having a much bulkier build? How bizarre. What the hell is this? He growled bitterly. Lam Kiat glanced at him with half an eye full of contempt, thinking to himself that this knight looked cool on the outside but was extremely weak on the inside. If his guess was not wrong, the initial talent he had chosen was the fiery field. It helped wrap the body in a super cool divine flame, which looked spectacular, but it came with the painful cost of losing 2 points of strength, leaving his body as fragile as rice paper, effectively throwing away the knight's charge skill. Seeing this, Lam Kiat did not bother to show any respect and spoke sarcastically, "What kind of flame knight hides behind teammates all day? You were just a cowardly clown who likes to show off." Feeling bitterly mocked by Lam Kiat, the knight was furious and was about to rush forward to settle the score. However, the confrontation was interrupted because the system suddenly warned Lam Kiat that he had been targeted by the terrible demon. The knight quickly ran for his life, not forgetting to throw back a provocative remark, "Surprise, comrade. The terrible demon is about to give you a free ticket to the respawn screen, so do not blame anyone." Only now did Lam Kiat realize that the jerk of a knight had deliberately played a trick on him. His purpose in pulling the monster over was to use it to destroy Lam Kiat. Although his physical strength was weak, his mind was quite scheming, not at all as stupid as the dummy he had bumped into in the city. He calculated in his head that defeating a level 2 terrible demon would not be enough to level him up. This actually turned out well because he could maintain the minimum level required to face the griffin. Since he had to fight anyway, he might as well do a light warm-up to get used to it. Seeing that Lam Kiat did not bother to hide but instead charged straight at the terrible demon, the whole group was extremely shocked. They were absolutely certain that he had been scared out of his wits and lost his mind. Lam Kiat rushed forward with a towering, majestic aura. Every move of the opponent was crystal clear to him, helping him dodge attacks with flawless, perfect smoothness. As a warrior, only when standing on the brink of life and death can one break through their own limits. Only by throwing oneself into danger can one transform into an undefeated god of war. Only by constantly challenging countless hardships in this life can one stand at the peak of the world. Wake up from your dream, idiot. Lam Kiat immediately unleashed an extremely heavy critical strike, blowing away 6 points of the target's health, being driven into a frenzy. Its damage output surged by another 50%. Seeing that scene, the others were completely stunned, because this was the monster's extreme power charge, and for a newbie to rush in at this moment was no different from stepping straight into a coffin. However, Lam Kiat still rushed forward like crazy, because his current arm strength was not up to par yet. He had to get extremely close to the enemy. This daring charge. The next critical hit caused the terrible demon to lose another 10 health points, while also knocking the weapon right out of its hand. Taking advantage of the moment when the monster was still dizzy from the torturous pain, Lam Kiat quickly delivered an additional blow. A flurry of relentless and ruthless strikes kept raining down on it. Not long after that, he finished it off with his own hands, pocketing a full 100 experience points and 5 spare coins. Constantly pushing beyond one's own limits is the key to unlocking a new era. Lam Kiat's performance made the other group rub their eyes in disbelief. How could a level 1 rookie with a dry piece of firewood fight alone and take down a level 2 monster so easily? The knight on the other side still insisted that he was just lucky. However, the leader of the group noticed the anomaly immediately. He then approached with a light chuckle, "Very nice, kid. You must be a veteran from some limited beta test. Such skillful moves are impossible for a rookie who hasn't put in at least a few hundred hours of play. Why don't you join us? Our group is missing a superstar," he said, acting extremely polite as he made the invitation. But Lam Kiat bluntly refused immediately because he did not care in the slightest. The other guy still clung like a leech and explained further, "Continuing along this route leads to the Griffin boss. The system requires a 5-man party to enter. Our group happens to have 4 people, adding you makes a perfect full squad." Just as he finished speaking, a message popped up on Lam Kiat's interface. "Player named Red is inviting you to join the party. Accept or decline." It turned out this annoying guy's nickname was Red. To lure the talent into his team, he even went big by proposing a fair 50-50 split of the loot. But Lam Kiat remained completely indifferent. That 5-person requirement was actually just a recommendation from the game, not a mandatory condition to unlock the dungeon. Witnessing that coldness, Red began to break a sweat and pressed on, "Are you really planning to go alone? At this level of difficulty, relying solely on individual skills will only get you wiped out. Listen, kid, the reward for the first Griffin kill includes an exclusive title and a rare heirloom artifact. There are currently dozens of teams lurking around to hunt it down, and our group is the most promising one. It's a huge blessing for you to be invited." Red raised his voice as if bestowing a favor. The lackeys behind him also nodded in agreement, chiming in that during Phase 2, the Griffin beast would summon extremely powerful guardian monsters, and without a tank to absorb the damage, the whole team would evaporate in an instant. Hearing that, Lam Kiat chuckled softly and threw them a knowing look. "It's just that you guys are desperate for a meat shield, and I happen to fit the role of a tank warrior, right?" Red hurriedly waved his hands frantically to deny it, asserting that he deeply appreciated his talent. He firmly stated that his strength was fully deserving of standing among the elite ranks, and they were absolutely not just recruiting anyone to make up the numbers. Lam Kiat fully understood that dark intention. They were just hunting for a fool to be a scapegoat and take the hits for the whole team. However, he still pretended to close his eyes in contemplation, as if hesitating over his choice. After a few seconds of silence, Red pried again to ask about his decision. Thinking he would receive another bitter rejection, to his surprise, this time Lam Kiat nodded in agreement to join. Of course, this guy was not that foolish. The difficulty level and the quality of the rewards from the dungeon boss would vary accordingly based on the number of members in the challenging party. Once all 5 members joined the battle, the boss would trigger its ultimate enraged state. In return, upon defeating it, the dropped treasure would be of extremely high quality. In any case, after this hidden questline ended, the Griffin Guardian would disappear without a trace from the game world, meaning the loot obtained would be a one-of-a-kind exclusive. Lam Kiat was determined to conquer the pinnacle of power, and that reward would be a crucial stepping stone for his next advancement. Even though he had joined the team, Lam Kiat still secretly schemed to claim this unique prize for himself. On the way to the entrance of the Griffin dungeon, Lam Kiat casually took down quite a few ferocious monsters. Seeing him like this, the Rex squad could only shake their heads in frustration. This idiot, he should have saved his energy before entering the dungeon, Rex grumbled, while the mage beside him chimed in, wondering if he even knew how precious early-stage recovery potions were. Statistics show that one has to kill 100 creatures just to find 2 silver coins, let alone hope for a green tier item. Apart from free items from recharge packages, it is rare for anyone to own green tier equipment on the first day of a server launch, the knight added. Just as Lam Kiat wiped out a pack of monsters, the wooden stick in his hand suddenly glowed. It then displayed a message indicating that it was searching for a companion. Black snapped at him again, telling him to stop staring at it, saying that monster weapons cannot be used by players, and that it is a rule not to pick up items dropped on the ground. Otherwise, the ease of picking up and selling monster weapons would have increased the value of items on the first day of launch 100-fold. Clearly, Black had no idea what Lam Kiat was actually aiming for, as he didn't care about those cheap monster weapons at all. It was just that the system kept reporting that the wooden stick was looking for an owner. And wondering if it wanted to merge with some monster-esque equipment, Lam Kiat started searching, and then he discovered a blade. Hoping to merge it with the wooden stick in his hand, the world tree branches began to blend with the weapon, and notifications appeared continuously before Lam Kiat's eyes. You have gained the right to use monster swords when the bleed effect from critical hits increases, critical hit rate decreases by 99, attack power increases by 10, and strength increases by 1. The superior world tree branches. Lam Kiat suddenly remembered that he seemed to have seen them at an auction 3 years ago. Their shape can change depending on the location and owner, but the original source of them all is the wooden stick. The unique point of this heirloom weapon is its ability to wrap around anything to turn it into a sword. To be more precise, it is like a divine sword hilt. In the end, this heirloom divine artifact was sold for 100 million yuan, and Lam Kiat himself could not have imagined that the weapon he spent only 1 unit of currency to buy was this very divine artifact. In the early stages, players only own white gear or are even empty-handed, yet even the lowest level monsters are equipped with green tier items, making the level of resistance between players and enemies almost uneven. However, Lam Kiat could take advantage of the world tree branches to pick up weapons from monsters that ordinary people could not use. Moreover, he could continuously hunt without any cost. It truly was a blessing from heaven. They stepped through the dungeon gate. Inside, the situation was as chaotic as a marketplace. In front of Lam Kiat's team, a group of guards was shouting to defend Meltown to the death and was desperately attacking the griffin monster. Don't rush in, this is the boss fight cutscene, only when that scene ends can we join the battle, Rex reminded him. He silently calculated that in just a few seconds, those 3 NPCs would be defeated, after which the Griffin would enter a recovery phase, during which its aggression and damage-dealing capabilities would decrease significantly. He signaled everyone to wait until he gave the word to rush in together, but Lam Kiat was not very interested in watching the end of this cutscene. He spoke loudly, everyone stop and go back, Captain Lance of the Guards is waiting for you all. These were just NPCs serving as plot support, even helping to weaken the boss a little, yet Lam Kiat did not know how to take advantage of them, instead telling them to stop and return to the city. Then, after hearing the mention of Lance's name, the guards actually stopped and followed Lam Kiat's instructions to leave. Explaining this action, he believed his way of fighting was to rush directly into battle, which was a faster way to enter the fray than waiting for the cutscene to play out. However, the price to pay for forcibly entering the scene is that the enemies will become exponentially more aggressive, especially towards the characters who rush into the fray first, who are usually warriors tasked with drawing the enemy's attention. Is this guy out of his mind, rushing straight into a direct fight like that? One of them muttered. Drake immediately ordered the other 3 to retreat, leaving Lam Kiat to whatever fate awaited him. Meanwhile, he craftily maintained a safe distance from the boss's damage zone. From the very beginning, he had no intention of sharing hardships with these people. However, this time Lam Kiat's actions did not stem from reckless impulsiveness. Instead, he had a perfectly good reason to carry out his own plan. The world line has now changed, the direction of the quests is no longer the same, and in this life, he is the one pulling the strings and overturning the existing order. As the butterfly flapping its wings to alter fate, he had to be even more proactive, especially when confronting the griffin face to face. They never believed he could defeat the monster, so Drake hastily instructed his subordinates to treat this guy as a sacrificial pawn to scout its moves, waiting for it to weaken before they would all rush in to deliver the final blow and snatch the valuable loot, feeling that his plan was absolute perfection. The guy next to him couldn't help but speak up, subtly reminding him that according to the system's design, the rewards would be divided equally, so wouldn't that just mean sharing experience points with him? Don't worry, I won't let him get his hands on the rewards in time. A sinister smile spread across Drake's face. Instantly, Lamkiet received a notification that he had been kicked from the party. Although he was struggling with all his might to fight off the griffin, Lamkiet still managed to glance at the notification that had just appeared. He was not in the least surprised, nor was he angry. This only confirmed his initial theory. Those people simply wanted to use him to wear down the boss's health so they could easily reap the benefits later. They were convinced that even with 5 of them, they might not defeat the griffin, let alone a level 1 guy like him, who would surely end up as beast food. Unfortunately, they had made a disastrous miscalculation, because Lamkiet was by no means a knave novice, but rather a warrior who had just returned from the dead. With that thought, he lunged forward, fiercely confronting the griffin. His title as the Undying God of War was certainly not a hollow name to be trifled with. The onlookers standing outside were suddenly stunned when they witnessed a terrifying explosion. Drake began to panic, stammering to ask if he had misheard, as the explosion just now sounded like a slash tearing through space itself. He did not seem to be overwhelmed by the griffin at all. Lamkiet's eyes burned with determination, and the weapon in his hand seemed to vibrate with excitement. Thanks to his talent, Oath of the Sword, the blade became sharper and more powerful than ever before. After only a brief clash, the griffin's health bar had dropped by half. The iron mask on the boss' face was also cracked open by Lamkiet's attacks. Only then did the onlookers outside begin to turn pale as they realized something was wrong. Everything seemed to be deviating from their calculations, and they gasped in horror that something was amiss. While they were still caught up in their panic, the griffin officially entered its second stage of rage. After this phase, the final boss became even more hyperactive and aggressive. However, our Lin Jie already saw right through it. He himself also enjoyed this thrilling and risky game, so as he watched Griffin rush forward furiously, Lin Jie remained as motionless as a stone statue. The crowd of onlookers around them suddenly felt their hearts race and legs tremble, thinking he was a fool for trying to take on the boss' 1,000-pound punch empty-handed. That young man is finished. The rest of us had better prepare to be next on the chopping block. An explosion shook the sky, kickstarting a cloud of dust that obscured the way back, and it seemed Griffin's recent attack had hit the target dead on. Thus, everyone was absolutely sure Lin Jie was about to get a round-trip ticket to the afterlife. Ironically, what seemed like a pipe dream to them was just a daily routine for him. The young man chose to be a warrior, a class ridiculed by the world for being poor, only to pull off a spectacular plot twist that left everyone dumbfounded. Not everyone is born with a silver spoon in their mouth, Lin Jie thought to himself as he stood firm as a rock amidst the ruins, blocking the monster's lethal blow without losing a single hair. 5 years ago in his previous life, before the game officially launched, Lin Jie had visited a shop to buy a virtual helmet. The shop owner told him the price was dirt cheap now, but once in the game the character's popularity would determine their wallet, so the wealthy just grabbed the high-end assassin class. As for the dirt poor, they had to settle for a minor support role or act as a meat shield for their teammates, and at that time, the warrior class was having a free promotional offer for new players. That grind to make a living was truly the perfect match for a penniless guy like him, and then, with the instincts of a commoner, Lin Jie realized an incredibly magical truth to change his life. Sometimes, to seize a great opportunity, one must know how to let go of trivial things. As the dust settled, everyone's jaws dropped when they saw him use his sword to deflect the boss' devastating punch. The onlookers could only stammer in shock, wondering how on earth a level 1 newbie could withstand such a fatal blow. And yet, he neutralized it effortlessly. From his past life to this life, investing the minimum but putting in maximum effort in the face of adversity was the formula that helped an ordinary person make a spectacular comeback. In this reincarnation, he was determined not to miss his chance, gripping his weapon tightly with absolute faith in himself and that protective sword. The special talent of grip strength enhancement helped Lin Jie hold his weapon securely, with no fear of dropping it along the way. Thanks to this, he easily aligned his blade to turn it into a highly convenient temporary shield. This explained how he was able to neutralize the opponent's ferocious onslaught as soon as their attack went off course. Refine immediately faltered, exposing a weakness. The golden opportunity for Lin Jie to make his comeback had arrived. He accepted giving up all other paths simply because he had no say from the beginning. Yet this sole remaining path was truly a gold mine for him. Even if the final boss turned into a god, it was bound to get beaten up. He himself had to rise to the peak of glory. That domineering thought kept swirling in Lin Jie's mind at the time. The warrior swung his sword mightily and let out a murderous shout. Prepare to pay with your life, refine. Neither side would back down, clashing fiercely with a power that shook the entire battlefield. However, with his nerves of steel and superhuman grip strength, Lin Jie completely crushed his inferior opponent. Looking at the defeated foe sprawled on the ground behind him, Lin Jie only cast a brief, disdainful glance. The system bell rang, congratulating him on sending the singer refined to his final resting place. Before he could even celebrate for 3 seconds, Lin Jae was exhausted and collapsed on his knees on the cold ground from depletion. Gently wiping the drop of blood from the corner of his mouth, Lin Jae sighed with exhaustion. Indeed, his depleted stamina at this moment made enduring another tempestuous attack from the guard leader too overwhelming. Struggling to pick himself up, the warrior silently thanked his luck, because his abundant health attribute had helped him preserve his last, fragile trace of life. The system chime rang out, signaling the successful defeat of the level 5 refined super guard, activating a 5-fold multiplier along with a reward of 350 experience points. Breakthrough to level 2. The personal interface window immediately displayed his illustrious identity, Lin Jae. Returnee level 2 human race warrior class, no title yet, health 145, ID empty, maximum rage 100, which gradually increases when taking hits or performing moves to activate new ultimate skills. Attack 13 to 17 thanks to the magic sword, basic physical defense 1, constitution, intelligence 7, intelligence 1, soul 1, willpower 3. Drake's eyes widened in astonishment at the scene before him, wondering if he was hallucinating or seeing things. He began to suspect that the ultimate variant of Refine had been nipped in the bud before it could even unleash its power. Despite the whispering crowd, the system announcements kept scrolling, confirming the completion of the life and death trial and honoring the first player in Goddess Domain to eliminate the Refine boss. Personal reputation in the small town of Mel increased sharply by 200, helping your respect level here reach the highest milestone of over 300 points. Just as the mechanical voice died down, a brilliant streak of light from Griffin's treasure chest suddenly radiated, blinding the entire sky. Bitter and full of envy, Drake muttered, "Damn it, that guy must have exploited a game bug to cheat, otherwise how could he have won?" Unwilling to lose his share, he roared orders for the 3 of them to rush forward and gather all the scattered loot, asserting that even if they didn't fight, they should still get a fair share. Hack hurriedly reached out to grab the treasure, but his hands trembled violently as he cried out, "Boss, I can touch any of this equipment." A red warning message appeared, "You do not have the authorization to possess this item." Ignoring the refusal message, Hack screamed in frustration, "How the hell do I not have the right? If I want to pick it up, who's gonna stop me?" Only at this moment did Drake suddenly realize that, because Lin Jae had single-handedly defeated Griffin, while he himself had just coldly kicked him out of the party, things had come to this pass. He held his head and groaned helplessly, "It's all ruined, none of the loot has anything to do with us anymore." Instantly, a gleaming metal bell materialized along with a detailed description, "Golden Bell of the Griffin Guard." An ancient treasure handed down. When activated, it creates a shocking resonance along with a solid protective shield to nullify all lethal blows, and the shattering sound of the treasure also knocks enemies far away, usable only once per day. Staring intently at the tiny ornament, Lin Jae muttered, "I didn't expect the reward dropped by such a giant boss to be so small." He quickly reached out toward the treasure to complete the retrieval of the loot that belonged to him. Instantly, a radiant aura enveloped Lin Jae as countless sparkling gold coins automatically flew straight into his inventory. Witnessing the gold coins slip from his grasp and fly straight to Lin Jae, Hack could only widen his eyes and cry out in sheer frustration. Furiously cursing out loud, Hack yelled, "Damn it, how can we let that brat snatch all the hard work of the entire team right out from under our noses?" Rick placed a hand on his teammate's shoulder to comfort him. "Calm down, Hack. Even if he was quick to gather all the items, it doesn't matter." He smirked slyly. "The rules of the era dictate that upon a character's death, all equipment collected within the past day will drop, so now we just need to take him out and we'll be set." Visualizing the scenario of reclaiming all the treasures in his mind, Rick laughed secretly, but Hack still fearfully dissuaded him. "But Senior, that warrior single-handedly slaughtered the Griffin, so his strength is definitely not to be underestimated." A truck standing next to them sneered in disdain, "What is there to worry about? He just exhausted his health and has only 3% left," while activating his eagle eye skill to verify the information. Stroking his chin with smug confidence, he said, "At this moment, just a light swing of a basic skill is enough to send that guy to his grave." Ray pulled out his greatsword and urged, "Brothers, turn on PK mode. Lin Jae got a ticket to enter the cave today, but Dante expect him to crawl his corpse out." The whole crowd immediately surrounded Lin Jae aggressively, while the young man stood there calmly staring back. Lin Jae's mind was still busy calculating. Defeating a boss would pocket him 100 coins right away, plus a bunch of high-quality crafting materials. Glancing at his system inventory, Lin Jae calculated with delight. Each coin could be exchanged for 12,000 yuan, so gathering them all tonight would bring in a total of 1.2 million. This was indeed a jackpot. Ray sneaked up behind Lin Jae and said in a sarcastic tone, "Congratulations on falling into the trap, you fool. After all, you've shown that you're no pushover." Lin Jae turned his head and said nonchalantly, "Cancelled the deal and even kicked me out of the party yourself. It's too late for apologies now, my friend Ray." He wagged his finger dismissively. "This group stood and watched because we trusted your skills so much. See, carrying a 5-man dungeon all by yourself is pretty awesome, isn't it?" Then Ray showed his cunning face and questioned, "With such a glorious achievement, shouldn't we get a share of the spoils too?" Right at that moment, a flashing red warning screen popped up, and the system blared with a notification that he had just taken a critical hit. Lin Jae immediately coughed up blood. The game screen kept flashing. Before reaching a safe zone, his maximum HP immediately dropped by 90%. All of his stats were cut in half. Ray laughed gleefully and said bluntly, "We know all your tricks inside out. The game ends here." He narrowed his eyes and threatened cunningly, "Keep this well in mind. Your partner is the notorious Ray Outlaw Guild, and our rule is..." Ray then showed his true villainous nature. "After killing the boss, we kill the player too. When we shake hands to cooperate, we will definitely backstab you." His accomplices stood behind him, bows drawn and ready, as Ray sneered triumphantly, "And as for you, Lin Jai." He then jerked his chin and pointed straight at Lin Jai's face, shouting loudly, "It is time to hand over all of your gear and inventory." Lin Jai calmly watched the glowing arrow graze past his arm, thinking to himself, that indeed is the hunter's eagle eye skill. Looking at the arrow embedded in the stone pillar behind him, Lin Jai knew all too well that the skill dramatically increased accuracy in open spaces. That guy had clearly missed on purpose. He didn't bother beating around the bush, looking straight at them and asking with a tilt of his head, "What are you trying to do?" Drake spoke up in a seemingly friendly tone, "Why bother fighting and getting tired? Hand over all the drops from the Griffin boss, that wooden branch in your hand and everything you are wearing. Strip it all off and give it to us." That guy pointed straight at Lin Jai and ordered arrogantly, "If you obediently get down on your knees and beg, we might consider sparing your life." Rick spoke with a haughty and ruthless attitude, "But I would prefer you to crawl out naked, so everyone can see you in total humiliation." He laughed hysterically like a madman, "A dirt-poor newbie with nothing on. Did you think finding a boss weakness by luck would change your life? At your core, you are still just a stupid dog at the bottom of society trying to climb too high." Listening to him speak as if watching a comedy show, Lin Ji curled his lips, let out a soft chuckle and said leisurely, "Have you really dropped your mask that far already?" Quickly drawing the weapon in his hand and pointing it straight ahead, Lin Jai said in a firm, steely voice, "The answer is absolutely no way." Staring right at Rick's face, Lin Jai shot back coldly, "You are nothing but a pebble blocking my path to leveling up. I am more than ready to crush it underfoot and move on." He continued his challenge, "I don't even care who the guy stuck to the sole of my shoe is or what hole he crawled out of." Lin Jai lightly wiped the trickle of blood from the corner of his mouth and retorted defiantly, "If you've got the guts, come over here and take my life, Rick. My hands and feet are already itching for a fight." Rick put his hands on his hips, snarled and demanded, "You dare refuse? Very well, you've got some nerve." He immediately ordered the archer standing behind him to draw his bow and send him to the afterlife. The system suddenly chimed, activating Calamity Vision. Lam Kiet immediately pulled out the golden bell he had just picked up to face the battle. From that treasure, tens of thousands of brilliant pink rays of light burst out, carrying destructive power. An earth-shattering explosion rang out, catching the surrounding crowd completely off guard. When the thick dust settled slightly, Rake's lackeys gaped in surprise as he cursed, "Damn it, that is the golden bell, the divine artifact dropped by Griffin." Hack scratched his head in confusion, wondering what that golden bell did, and if it made him invincible under heaven. Safely sheltered behind the golden bell, Lam Kiet smirked and said, "Of course it's not invincible, but it's enough to buy me a second to catch my breath." Hack snorted in disdain, "What on earth can you do in 1 second? You were going to die anyway, what's the difference if it's sooner or later?" Lam Kiet smirked knowingly, "Because upgrading my skill only takes exactly 1 second. Stepping out of the safe zone, Lam Kiet declared that he would crush all 3 of the annoying troublemakers. Right at that moment, the system announced that he had reached level 2 and could use his skill points. He immediately spent the skill point he had just received to unlock the exclusive ultimate move reserved for warriors. The skill was called Death's Breath. When backed into a corner, the body would automatically activate a temporary life recovery state, especially when on the verge of death or surrounded. The amount of health restored would be incredibly massive, he thought to himself, and perhaps even. Deep down, Lam Kiet fully believed that this skill would also help break through all normal health limits of a warrior. Achet panicked in utter shock. His health has recovered. How could he break through the wound limit like that? Lam Kiet cast a deadly glare at his opponents and said, "This is the power of hell. Do you guys want to taste it?" Mikey screamed to warn his companions, "Don't be afraid. His sword is still stuck in the ground. Take this opportunity and charge." Lam Kiet didn't bother to argue. His eyes flashed as he dashed forward like an arrow. Rake stared wide-eyed at this terrifying speed, asking himself tremblingly, "What the hell is going on?" Before Rake could even finish his question, Lam Kiet closed in and landed a heavy punch right in Achet's face. Even lightning was not as fast as this move. They only had time to hear a deafening explosion, right where Achet was standing. Hack and Mikey stared in astonishment, marveling in their hearts, how is he so fast? They shouted in panic with bare hands. Was Achet knocked down with just 1 punch? The system screen announced, "Punch Power Boost activated. Whenever entering battle barehanded, the warrior will receive a significant increase in physical damage." Realizing the perilous situation, Rake roared and ordered Mikey to use Ice Burst to control the opponent, and Mikey immediately obeyed. Mikey immediately executed the Ice Burst skill at extreme speed. The system issued a notification, "Frozen body unable to move." Seizing the opportunity, Heck immediately carried his greatsword and leaped forward to make a sneak attack, shouting, "I've been annoyed with you for a long time. This block of ice is your grave. Go to hell." However, Lam Kiat easily sidestepped to dodge the blow effortlessly, as the system chimed to announce that he had passed the strength challenge, breaking free from the ice imprisonment. He raised his fist, his eyes wide open, exuding a deadly aura. Lin Jie struck, sending him flying far away as he let out a cry of pain. Mikey absolutely could not believe it. This was too absurd. How could my ice army fail to control him? Lin Jie turned around and calmly replied, "As long as you have enough strength, you can completely use brute force to break free from restraints. An ice spell of this level is just a trifle to me." Mikey was extremely surprised and confused. His attribute stats were clearly reduced by half due to his serious injuries, so why did he still have enough strength? In his mind, he kept denying it. No, it's impossible. Just look at the battle aura surrounding him. Mikey grimaced. No matter how he looked, there was no sign of reduced attributes. He immediately turned and shouted, "Ah, damn it. Quick, use your appraisal eye to check his attributes." But before anyone realized it, Lin Jie had silently appeared beside him, grabbed Mikey's hand, and said, "No need." Then Lin Jie kindly reminded him, "That hunter who was knocked out by me with just one punch earlier, have you forgotten him?" Only then did Mikey realize in shock, "Ah, damn it, no, this is wrong." Furious and embarrassed, Mikey screamed at Lin Jie, "Cheater. He must have cheated." Lin Jie's eyes widened in surprise, but Mikey continued to shout, "You are a fraud." In Lin Jie's mind, voices echoed fraud. He suddenly remembered Bai Lai's reproach, "How dare you use a cheated weapon? Why did you treat me like this?" Bai Lai's judgment at that time echoed, "It's too late to say anything now, you've lost." Lin Jie roared, "Only by giving up everything one believes in can one choose a path of no return, and I absolutely will not go down that road." He seemed to lose control, violently jerking Mikey's arm and cursing, "You bastards, when you can win, you only know how to slander people for cheating." Mikey was stunned and stammered in plea, You are very strong, I surrender. Please don't kill me, I will leave Drake's gang immediately." But Lin Jie did not let go. He said, "It is too late." System notification, grip strength enhance. Then he flung Mikey hard. Mikey's entire body was sent flying far away, and a small explosion sounded where he fell. As the thick smoke and dust cleared, Lin Jie's towering figure still stood there. Right at that moment, a voice sounded from behind. "Interesting. You have just personally eliminated your last advantage. Your class is a warrior." Drake said with a dismissive voice, "I know very well how you used your class advantage to achieve this unthinkable feat," and tightened his grip on the blade in his hand and said, "To be able to unleash such incredible power even in disadvantageous situations, especially when surrounded by a large number of enemies." System notification, warrior trait, last stand. When surrounded, attributes are significantly boosted. Surrounded state requires being surrounded by at least 3 enemies to activate. Drake said slowly, "The surrounded state requires being surrounded by at least 3 enemies to activate. Now that there is only me left, last stand cannot be activated, and all of your tricks will come to an end." Unfazed, Lin Jie replied, "Indeed, so I will send you back to town fair and square with a single slash of my sword." Drake then enhanced his stats, saying disdainfully, "It seems you still don't understand the current situation, Lin Jie. I, an assassin, am a PK-type class with enhanced 1v1 combat capability. Now that I clearly hold the advantage, you will definitely die." Drake shouted smugly at Lin Jie, "Now I will take your dog life." Having said that, he rushed quickly toward Lin Jie with terrifying power. Lam Kiat quietly observed the opponent in front of him, silently assessing in his mind that the assassin profession is a master at exploiting every weakness. Any part of the body that takes a hit from them would be afflicted with an additional layer of debuff. Now, Lam Kiat analyzed his own vulnerabilities. A critical blow to the head would cause a blindness effect, rendering all subsequent attacks useless. If hit in the arms, the opponent would be disarmed, the torso would suffer a persistent bleeding effect, while the legs were crippled, losing the ability to move. He was well aware of his weaknesses. If he took even a single hit, he would quickly be burdened with a stacking pile of debuffs. Drake swung his sword repeatedly at Lam Kiat, but he swiftly dodged. Drake muttered, "Your agility is indeed not bad. Even when carrying such a heavy sword, your speed is still astonishing." Drake also understood the situation, so he spoke up, "However, close combat is my advantage. Once you are hit by an assassin, even with just a small scratch, you will be overwhelmed by a continuous accumulation of debuffs." With a darkened face, Drake spoke in a deadly voice, "You are just an easy prey. Soon you will have to kneel and beg me to grant you a painless death." But Lam Kiat did not show any signs of flinching. He suddenly realized something very important. Lam Kiat immediately seized the opening, knocking Drake's sword far away while quickly widening the distance. Drake staggered back a few steps, exclaiming in surprise, even when his stats have been reduced by half, "Is this guy's destructive power still so terrifying?" The instinctive strength of a warrior indeed cannot be underestimated. However, he quickly reassured himself, "It's fine. If this battle drags on, the one who dies will definitely be you." Lam Kiat's eyes flashed, and he shouted right in his opponent's face, "Who wants to fight a long battle with an idiot like you?" Using his agile movement, he rushed toward Drake, standing opposite the respawn point, and growled, "Repent now." Drake's eyes were wide open now. Before he could even react to Lam Kiat's terrifying strength, he thought, "It's over." He suddenly found himself standing naked in the midst of the respawn point, still confused. What's going on? Drake was still stunned, unable to compose himself. Have I already respawned at the respawn point?" System announcement, "You have been defeated by the warrior Lam Kiat. You have been penalized with a level reduction. Your level has decreased from level 3 to level 2, and all of your stats have been reduced. Hearing a familiar laughter from behind, Drake was startled and realized, what's the meaning of this? He roared in anger, what do you mean by laughing at me? A triad hastily reminded him, boss, your clothes and equipment have all been taken away. The system displayed a message, Era treasure heist mechanic. When a player dies, they will drop all items gathered within the past 24 hours. A triad cried out, it definitely hasn't been 24 hours yet. Mikey was even more surprised. What? Hearing this, Drake roared in fury, damn it, Lam Kiat. You dare to humiliate me in front of everyone. Just you wait, we are not done yet, we are not done. On this side, Lam Kiat casually replied, this sword was just to send Drake's body back to where it belongs, but why were all his clothes left behind? A person named Hat just woke up, rubbing his head and muttering, it hurts so much. Luckily, I'm afraid of pain, so I maxed out my defense stat, otherwise I would have been sent back to the main city in one blow. Where has everyone gone? Then he suddenly saw Lam Kiat standing there alone, and Hat's entire body immediately trembled. While clutching his wound and shaking violently, he stammered to threaten Lam Kiat, don't come over here. Don't get close, I'll stab you to death. But Lam Kiat only said to him politely, please take Drake's clothes back and return them to him. Lam Kiat stood behind him and continued, his voice full of subtext, by the way, pass a message to him if I cross paths with you guys again next time. His entire body radiated a cold killing intent, along with a threat, I will not stop killing you until your level is reduced to 0. Hat trembled violently, quickly turned around and stammered in reply, I understand. His eyes bulged and his whole body shook like a leaf, revealing extreme terror. His face suddenly contorted, and his cheeks puffed out as if he were holding a foreign object in his mouth. He hurriedly covered his mouth with both hands, looking as though he were about to retch. Sure enough, he collapsed to his knees on the ground and vomited blood, coughing uncontrollably. He turned his head in extreme confusion, wondering where this immeasurable, horrific pressure came from, an absolute suppression akin to the Reaper's scythe. Witnessing the blazing flames surrounding Lam Kiat's body, he trembled inwardly, stunned by the majestic figure resembling a god of war emerging from the realm of death. The system immediately honored the player for bravely punishing the villain, awarding a large amount of reputation points. Reputation points in Meltdown increased by 300. Your reputation in this land has exceeded 600 points, officially making you a living legend whom all NPCs admire and swear loyalty to. A statue will be erected in your honor at the plaza along with countless unique privileges from the main storyline. Lam Kiat frowned slightly and thought to himself that although being backstabbed by a teammate was unlucky, this massive amount of reputation was more than worth it. Now, he could leisurely return to the city to recover. As soon as Lam Kiat set foot back in the city, all his subordinates knelt on the ground, cheering enthusiastically in unison. This grand scene left him bewildered, completely failing to grasp what was happening. The crowd shouted in unison, we welcome Lord Dobard, the miracle worker, to receive the most formal welcoming ceremony in Meltdown. The system interface also flashed a notification congratulating the player on obtaining the noble title Blade of Dawn. People around whispered to each other, strange, what's going on? Why do the NPCs respect a player so much? What kind of divine name is Dobard anyway? A blue-haired guy asked curiously if this was a perk exclusive to Platinum VIP members and how many millions it cost. The person next to him immediately curled their lip in disdain, saying, stop dreaming, where would a low-ranking soldier nobody cares about get the money to at that luxury Platinum VIP card? Lam Kiat was also pensive. He seemed to have heard the name Dobard somewhere in a dungeon in his past life. Memories took him back to 3 years ago, when the entire world was shrouded in an inescapable eternal night. In lands teeming with ferocious monsters, the flickering spark of human civilization could have been extinguished at any moment. It was at that dark moment that a mysterious hero appeared with a primitive weapon, yet swung his sword to slice through the night and catch the first rays of dawn, turning that crude blade into a symbol of hope. Looking at the ally list displayed on the screen, Lam Kiat muttered, initiating a life and death battle at the gloomiest hour before dawn breaks, bringing warm light back to humanity. Finally, the back of the anonymous hero stood tall on the mountain peak, bathed in the golden morning sunlight, holding high a glittering sword that dispelled the darkness. As it turned out, Dobard was the noble title honoring those brave enough to venture forth and confront the forces of darkness. Lam Kiat remembered that this was one of the 8 legacy titles most heavily promoted when the game first launched, each associated with an ancient epic. He surmised that the authorities had once hinted at the very special origins of these titles, which were likely rewards for massive hidden achievements that no one had ever reached before. Smirking with satisfaction, Lam Kiat was extremely pleased that a rookie like himself had accidentally monopolized the precious Dobard legacy title right here in this beginner town. The cheers welcoming Lord Dobard echoed everywhere, making Lam Kiat ecstatic as he told himself that this was truly an unexpected windfall. A welcome echoed from the large mansion. Lord Dobard, your noble deed has touched the hearts of all the residents here. The soldier prostrating before Lam Kiat respectfully conveyed, Mayor Oliver Green has sent me Dixon to prepare a purification feast to welcome you. The system bell rang, signaling that the side quest The Path of Heroes in Meltdown had been activated, requiring him to move to the council chamber. The soldier bowed deeply and pleaded earnestly, I beg the great lord to allow your subordinate, Dixon, to lead the way for you. Lam Kiat smiled and waved his hand. No need, I can move on my own, just stay there. You know very well that showing off like this will only draw hostile glares, it's better to keep it low-key. Sure enough, right on the mark, a resentful voice rang out from the dark corner. What do you mean go back? He gnashed his teeth and muttered, just you wait, Lam Kiat. If I catch you in some corner, I'll definitely give you a taste of my blade. Mikey stood next to him, tugging his shirt to stop him. Let it go, boss. He's being flattered by this entire town. Running away is the best option. Drake's face turned purple with rage, and he pursed his lips to counter. What the hell do you know? Infamy is still fame, isn't it? If we can send him on his way, those other villains will definitely respect us a bit more. He widened his eyes in surprise and asked, so, boss, have you thought of any brilliant plan to deal with this guy yet? Drake sneered conspiratorially. On the outside I have no weight, but in this territory of Mel, this villainous Drake has more than enough authority to command. A soldier rushed over, pointing his weapon and warning them. The festival season in Meltown is coming up soon. Gathering while carrying weapons in any form is prohibited. Drake scratched his head and gave an awkward smile to salvage the situation. We were just doing normal trade and business. Why are you guys managing us so much? Aren't you gonna let people make a living? The soldier grunted and raised his hand threateningly. We retargeting prominent troublemakers. You already have a criminal record, so behave yourself while you re-in here. Drake muttered under his breath. Even in this Meltown there are still dark corners. Just you wait, Lam Kiat. While the grumbling voices were still echoing, putting Drake's group aside, Lam Kiat had already arrived at Mayor Green's town office. He had just pushed the door open and stepped inside. Immediately a greeting rang out. Welcome, Lord Doblet. Mayor Green ran over in delight to greet him. You've finally arrived. He held his hand tightly in gratitude. Thanks to our benefactor's intervention, the gloomy shadow named Griffin that has weighed heavily on our heads for all these years has finally been completely wiped out. The mayor continued his endless stream of praise. Your righteous act has not only saved the entire town but also spared the lives of countless innocent people. This achievement is truly worthy of going down in history, making Lam Kiat scratch his head in slight embarrassment. Oh, it was nothing. He thought to himself that in his past life, this mayor was an extremely strict and taciturn middle-aged man, probably because the long-term pressure from the terrifying monsters had kept his mind as tense as a violin string. Lam Kiat smiled inwardly. In this life, the mayor's complexion looked much healthier and his personality was far more open. He replied humbly, this is just my duty. Mayor Green glanced out the door and said excitedly, to ensure that future generations remember this immense favor, I would like to make a proposal on behalf of all the villagers. As he spoke, he waved his hands with excitement. We will cast a huge statue of pure gold right in the central square, so that anyone who sets foot here will marvel at your achievements with admiration. Without paying any attention to Lam Kiat's speechless expression, he continued to praise enthusiastically so that everyone can feel the majestic spirit of dog breath. Waiting for the other party to finish speaking, he gently declined, I accept your kind gesture, but such vain fame means nothing to me. The people here probably wouldn't care about having another stone statue erected in the middle of the street either. Lam Kiat looked straight into the mayor's eyes and suggested, how about this? I have a much more practical idea. Not at all offended by being rejected, he continued enthusiastically, please feel free to make your demands. From wealth to status, I will grant anything that is worthy of your achievements. He scanned the room and said, the threat of the Griffin has been eliminated, so the town's original defense budget should be reinvested into more practical areas to bring direct benefits to the people. Lam Kiat analyzed slowly. In my opinion, it should be split into two tasks. First, implement a long-term tax cut for fellow players at service stations, thereby lowering the startup costs for newbies and turning this place into a friendly and bustling hub. The mayor started to break out in a cold sweat upon hearing the request, and without stopping there, he added second, tighten security patrols in every corner to prevent future troubles, ensuring absolute safety for both locals and visitors. The old mayor secretly assessed in his mind that although he had encountered many powerful people who hungered for fame and fortune, he had never seen anyone who showed such thoughtful concern for the player community. He bowed his head solemnly and replied, your vision and generosity make me feel both respect and shame. We will proceed according to your wishes. I will issue this decree immediately. A giant notification board from the system suddenly appeared before everyone's eyes, announcing that from this moment on, all transaction activities in Meltown will have their taxes permanently halved. This supersized gift aims to provide extra motivation for the adventure of the newbies who have just joined the world. The entire area suddenly exploded with a series of shocked screams. Oh my god, a whole 50% discount. Which hidden tycoon is so generous? This time we'll save money on health potions and buffs. Thank you, god of wealth, from wherever you are. Long live Meltown. Mayor Green tremblingly expressed his boundless gratitude. Sir, your generosity has truly brought life-changing light to the people here. Having finished speaking, the old man took out an ancient key and handed it to Lin Jai. Please accept this as a small token of my personal appreciation. Mr. Green gently added that it was a two-story house nestled at the edge of town. Although it had been unoccupied for a long time, it possessed an extremely poetic view facing the windy fields. Now the cadastral map and this bronze key were officially transferred to his name. The esteemed mayor continued to make a sincere offer. I would like to solemnly welcome you to settle down and prosper in this warm land of Mel, making this place your true home. At the same time, the system sound rang out in congratulation. You have officially made history by becoming the first player to own a private house in the Era world. The displayed information detailed the apartment with $1 million windmill view, confirming that your illustrious reputation in this land has become legendary. Seeing the announcement scroll by, Lin Jae's eyes widened in astonishment, unable to believe that he held a privately owned plot of land in this early stage of the game. The young man understood all too well that at the very beginning, obtaining a personal land title deed was something one could not even dream of. All authority within the game was under the strict supervision of a super artificial intelligence capable of continuous self-upgrading. Era was completely different from other ordinary games, where wealthy tycoons could simply throw money around to buy up entire streets or make non-player characters kneel at their feet. In this vast land, every blade of grass and branch of a tree fell under clear jurisdiction, mostly held by the system's strongholds. In addition, the remaining territories belonged to ancient tribes, or lay under the control of super dangerous beasts. The rule here was very clear: ordinary players could at most rent a small stall or obtain short-term leasing rights. The harsh reality was that even powerful guilds had to grind relentlessly just to gather enough resources to apply for a tiny piece of land to settle on. On top of that, they always faced the risk of losing everything if they failed to defend their city or had it confiscated by the administration. Looking at the bronze treasure before him, Lin Jae thought to himself that having an inviolable home at this early stage was a massive stepping stone, thoroughly solving the issues of item storage and crafting research in the future. He smiled as he accepted the precious gift and nodded slightly. "Thank you, Mayor Green. This gift is indeed very much to my liking." Mr. Green smiled radiantly. "Having an honorable person like you choose to settle down here is our greatest honor, far exceeding the value of that solid gold statue in the middle of the square." Red text flashed to signal, "You have just activated the fast travel portal in the Mel Administrative District, unlocking the privilege of instant equipment maintenance with a single action when inside the town. Thanks to your immense contributions and outstanding personal reputation, you are granted online auction rights along with a lifetime 15% discount on all transactions here." Finally, there was a warm message of blessing. "May the sun always guide your path and protect you, hero." Having completed all the procedures, Lin Jae bowed slightly to bid farewell to the mayor, and then strolled to blend into the bustling crowd on the street. As he walked, he did some calculations in his head. Thanks to the recent tax reduction, he could now head straight to the market to buy some reserve supplies. Just as he brushed past a man in a red cloak, the system flashed a warning signal: "Pickpocketing detected. The opponent has passed the speed check." Lin Ji glanced at the red warning. His account balance was short by 100 coins. The culprit clutched the freshly snatched bag and chuckled with self-satisfaction. Lam Kiet hurriedly grabbed the other person's shoulder and shouted, "Return my things to me right now." However, that person suddenly vanished, leaving only a bright red cloak in Lam Kiet's hand. He flew into a rage and scolded, "This is outright daylight robbery. It seems this cat town needs to tighten its security soon." Determined not to let the thief escape, Lam Kiet chased after them at full speed and shouted, "Stop right there." In the corner of a dead-end alley, a long-haired girl was panting, and standing opposite her was the familiar figure of Lam Kiet. He stared at the other Aspak and said, "Don't even think about running anymore. There is no way out behind you." Helene crossed her arms, smirked, and replied, "Shouldn't it be my turn to say that?" The system introduces Helene of the Street of Darkness, Level 6, Elite Rogue. Lam Kiet suddenly recalled 4 familiar figures, as the sounds of Level 5 Elite Rogues echoed continuously in his ears. Lam Kiet cracked his knuckles and muttered, "I almost forgot, this small cat town still has a dark side that few know about. You must be Helene, the boss of the Street of Darkness." Hearing that, she pouted and replied, "You're quite good at gathering information, kid. Are you an alpha tester by any chance?" Lam Kiet recalled the past. In his previous life, he had been pickpocketed by none other than an NPC from the Street of Darkness, so this trick was all too familiar to him. Helene leisurely sat on a wooden crate and explained, "To put it simply, someone paid money to take your life, so you must go see the King of Hell." Lam Kiet calculated. Up to now he had only made enemies with 2 people, the Paladin Balai and the assassin of the Noob Villain Guild. He lifted his chin and questioned Helene. "In the end, who is the one who wants my life?" She didn't bother to reply, only casting a contemptuous look at Lam Kiet. "You already know the answer. It's Lord Dobard. Do you really expect me to spell it out for you?" Lam Kiet sneered as expected. "That guy is a coward who dares not confront me directly, only knowing how to hire a few assassins to ambush me." Helene leisurely stroked her hair and said, "I am merely an NPC who takes money to do a job. The grudges between players have nothing to do with me." She lightly licked her lips, cast a sharp gaze at Lam Kiet, and ordered, "Execute him for me." Immediately, a crowd brandishing weapons appeared from behind and rushed straight forward to attack Lam Kiet. They aggressively rushed forward to fight with their lives on the line, their sole objective being to take his life. In the narrow alley, a fierce melee unfolded with thick dust and smoke obscuring the view. With a sharp sword in hand, Lam Kiet stood as only fragments of bodies remained around him, gradually dissolving into nothingness. Helene, who had been sitting and watching the battle all this time, involuntarily clapped her hands in praise. You are indeed very capable, kid. Lam Kiat glanced sideways at her and asked bluntly without any politeness, is there anyone else who wants to come at me? Helian gracefully jumped down to the ground and said, okay, that's enough. This trip is a heavy loss. Doing business like this, I doubt the medical expenses for these useless guys would even be covered. She waved her hand and ordered, all of you retreat. Even if you all charged together, you wouldn't be a match for Lord Dogbraid. The Dempsey scrambled up and replied, understood, big sis. Helian held her head and sighed in frustration. Being an NPC making a living always requires meticulously calculating every single cost. She shouldered her weapon, brushed past Lam Kiat, and muttered, I will report back to Drake word for word like this. Helian of the Street of Darkness tried her best, but the opponent was too tough, so she had to give up halfway. Hearing her say that made Lam Kiat so angry that his veins bulged, but Helian didn't forget to tease him. See you later, young Master Dobard. Next time you visit the Street of Darkness for a drink, just mention my name. He glared at the woman's retreating figure and hissed in anger, stop right there for me. As soon as she heard Lam Kiat calling her back, Helian turned her head with an annoyed attitude, thinking that she had spared his life and he still didn't know his place. Lam Kiat raised his hand high and shouted, demanding back his important item, that money bag, give it back to me quickly. Ignoring everything, she held the money bag and twisted a candy, thinking she had generously spared the kid's life, only for him to dare stand there and bargain with her. With eyes as cold as a month-end salary, Helian spoke up, this is your life-saving fee, you idiot. Listening to that lame excuse made his blood boil, and he argued back that the money was entirely earned through his own hard work. His entire body erupted with a terrifying pressure as he declared, if you want to snatch my stuff, you should at least put in some effort. Without any hesitation, Helian snapped back, very well, then all the money and rewards on you will be mine. Both sides rushed at each other with intense killing intent, and no one knew how the situation would turn out. In terms of aura, they were evenly matched, but if it came to raw physical strength, would Helian be able to crush Lam Kiat? The sharp weapon in Helian's hand cleanly sliced Lam Kiat's sword in half. She even shamelessly mocked him, saying that doing so was deliberately destroying property. Lam Kiat pondered in confusion in his memory of his old class. The Amdachin High was just a minor, insignificant character in the black market. Helian teased him, you have a decent face? Do you need me to spare some change so you can go to the blacksmith and buy a new sword? Lam Kiat remained silent, his mind constantly wondering why things had escalated to such a dramatic and explosive point. Lam Kiat's face was hidden in the shadows, and he said slowly, even if I am empty-handed without any weapons. He clenched his veiny fists and added with determination, I will definitely not let you guys off. Helian closed one eye and sneered, using this provocation trick is really just reusing a cliché. She drove her sword into the ground and said firmly, however, I am in a good mood today, so I am willing to trade a few moves with you for fun. Helian roared her command, where are my men? Give this guy a warm welcome, Amchinhai style now. The gang of lackeys shouted in unison with excitement, mighty boss. Boss is invincible under heaven. They cheered enthusiastically to boost her morale, go boss go, you will surely win big. Lam Kiat was lost in the sea of people cheering and supporting their female leader. Without any hesitation, she rushed forward like a storm, aiming her sharp claws straight at Lam Kiat. Lam Kiat dodged the attack in a flash and mocked her for being too slow, but then he noticed a few strands of his hair had just been sliced off. Helian leaped high into the air and shouted, hey young man, try this move. From high above, the female bandit delivered a powerful blow straight down toward Lam Kiat's head. Sweating profusely, he gritted his teeth and cursed to himself, this woman is indeed fierce. In the blink of an eye, Lam Kiat raised his bare hands to block Helian's hammer-like kick. Landing as light as a feather after a few rounds of sparring, Helian silently admired him, thinking that this guy was indeed not to be underestimated. With eyes full of killing intent and clenched fists, he rushed toward her like an arrow. Helian quickly counterattacks, both of them soar into the air swinging their fists to fight. Let's see how you handle this move. As soon as she touched the ground, she swept a kick toward Lam Kiat, but he easily evaded it by jumping up. Helian clicked her tongue in regret, almost got you kid, your reflexes are really something. Helian followed up with a powerful punch straight to his face. How could he block it this time? As quick as lightning, Lam Kiat grabbed her wrist with a sharp gaze, but the problem was. Seeing this, Helian was startled, breaking into a sweat and staring in surprise. She immediately yanked her pinned arm back at dizzying speed. He delivered a heavy punch, but she leaned back to evade it. We should stop this here. The wall that took the full force of Lam Kiat's punch had cracked open a large area. Helian smirked, pretty interesting, I can even take you down barehanded in a short time. He clenched his fist, furrowed his brows and asked, is it worth continuing to drag this out? The damage you will suffer soon will be greater than what you earn. Hearing this, the opponent widened her eyes, dazed for a few seconds. Helian then burst into a hearty laugh, saying, damn, this guy is really attractive. She pulled out the pouch of money, laughing playfully, oh well, forget it, I am sick of this. Helian threw the pouch of money toward Lam Kiat, fighting to the death over a few coins would ruin all of my business. Having finished speaking, she turned around and slipped away. Guys, let's withdraw, see you again, handsome boy. He watched Helian's receding figure and muttered in confusion, she really is a crazy lady. Lam Kiat opened the pouch, wondering if his eyes were playing tricks on him. Why did it feel heavier than before? He was startled to touch a very strange object that was not a coin. What on earth is this? Lam Kiet stared blankly at the eyeball sitting in his palm. Oh my god, what is this? Where did it come from? The system interface announced that the item just now came from the hands of Helion of the Dark Street. The screen displayed a brief message, a welcoming gift for you. No need to be polite. Looking forward to working together happily in the future, my lord. He stared intently at the bizarre object. What kind of joke is cooperation and gifts? Lam Kiet squeezed hard, making the eyeball emit a few cracking sounds. Instantly, an intense jolt surged through his left eye socket. Lam Kiet clutched his left eye and knelt down on one knee, groaning in agonizing pain that shot straight to his brain. The system chimed, signaling that you have just obtained the inheritance artifact, the Eye of Truth. An eyeball of unknown origin, tied to countless ancient mysteries, a unique gift sent by Helion, the master of the Dark Street, to help you see through all illusions and grasp the truth. He panted and muttered to himself, cooperate happily, huh? What an unexpected bargain. I've never heard of this treasure before. Lam Kiet smirked with excitement. It seems this second life has a lot more fun in store than I imagined. The scene shifted to the bustling atmosphere of a market early the next morning. Walking leisurely while observing his surroundings, the young man wondered if he could pick up a bargain here. Lam Kiet's gaze accidentally stopped at the shouts of someone selling black stones, priced at just 1 coin for a pile to choose from as one pleased. He narrowed his eyes, staring intently at that pile of goods, and thought to himself. He stood dazed before the 2 baskets of black stones, the most common mineral of this era, which gamers dug frantically to find valuable magic crystals, causing so many minds to collapse. Thinking this, he turned around intending to slip away. This scrap piled up in gamers' warehouses was no different from trash, and even if given away for free, it would just waste storage space. Suddenly, the system chime rang out joyfully, and the Eye of Truth skill was officially activated. Lam Kiet's eyes suddenly flashed with a brilliant light. Oh, so it could actually activate automatically. His gaze was fixed on a stone nestled deep inside. Wait a minute, that thing was very strange. He stared intently at the stone and told himself it looked completely different from the rest. Just as he picked up the stone, the system notification panel immediately appeared. The Eye of Truth had successfully appraised the starlight stone. Cursing excitedly in his heart, Lam Kiet was deeply impressed. He didn't expect this skill to be so overpowered, picking up a treasure just by taking a casual stroll. Quickly tossing a coin to the seller, he thought to himself that it was best to grab the item first and study it later. Pointing his index finger at the stone, he asked to buy it, and the middle-aged man quickly replied that of course it was for sale. Overjoyed, the old man presented the item with both hands and praised him endlessly as a true connoisseur, but in his mind, he mocked him for being incredibly foolish. Laughing heartily inside, the old man thought that he had managed to get a coin for that piece of junk, making today his lucky day. With a meaningful smirk, Lam Kiet gently squeezed his hand, and the stone immediately shattered into tiny pieces. Spreading his palm open, he praised it in awe. The starlight stone was completely flawless, its outer black stone shell so cleverly disguised that ordinary appraisal tricks were utterly useless against it. Cherishing the treasure under the light, he muttered to himself that no wonder it was hidden among the trash. Selling it directly to an NPC would definitely fetch well over 100 coins. Contemplating the starlight stone, he remembered that it had a very special use. The residue after decomposition could be used as a top-tier alchemy material, so to maximize its value, he should probably try using alchemy. Entering the era world where players were free to choose their path of development, most preferred to be lifestyle players, working as tailors, crafters, or jewelers as a side job. The entry barrier for these professions was extremely low, and they felt like real life, helping to relieve stress after intense battles, so everyone tried them a few times. However, the field of alchemy was a completely different exception. Not only was it difficult and expensive, but the process was also extremely dangerous. A single failed potion brewing could result in blowing oneself to pieces right on the spot. You have taken your own life. That was the eternal haunting curse of alchemists. Opening the system interface to check, Lam Kiet told himself to measure the commercial value of the alchemy industry at this moment. The screen clearly displayed a medium healing potion priced at 10 coins, along with a daily purchase limit. Stroking his chin and calculating meticulously, Lam Kiet furrowed his brows and shook his head. If he followed the officially released recipe, the cost of materials would be even higher than the selling price, and he would end up losing heavily either way. He sighed and calculated that, not to mention the failure rate of up to 60%, which nearly doubled the actual cost compared to the official listed price. Looking at the man sitting on the ground shivering from the cold to sell potions, he understood why almost no one grew rich from this profession, and the more money they poured in, the more capital they lost. A sly smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, but the thing was, he had survived an era for a whole 5 years and possessed quite a few exclusive recipes. Lam Kiet stopped by the grocery stall. Although he knew the recipe by heart, he still found it difficult because the most crucial ingredient for this item was glowstone dust. While bargaining with the shopkeeper, he pondered and calculated. The item obtained from the Lotus Descent this time was his golden ticket to making a fortune. From afar, two strangers secretly trailed him. Gyapa nudged his elbow to signal, "Look, that guy is buying things again," to which Octa curled his lips and replied, "Never mind him, just buy whatever he buys. If he makes a profit, we'll benefit too." He smugly waved the stone in his hand. "After all, this guy named Dobert is too business savvy. Last time I saw him buy black stones, so I copied him to try my luck." Gyapa's face went blank. "Oh no, the shopkeeper just tricked me into taking a bunch of dead stock." On the other side, the shopkeeper looked at the black stone in his hand in utter confusion. "Wait a minute, did I underprice this item?" Scrolling through the system panel, he quickly gathered enough glass bottles and a bunch of dirt-cheap herbs, deciding to use his skill to craft 100 recovery potions to make it worth the effort. The virtual screen popped up a notification: glowstone dust has been crafted successfully. He wondered blankly what he had just broken, while Gyapa shouted, "You idiot, it's definitely that black stone. He is planning to craft a massive item, which is why he needs this core ingredient." He laughed gleefully, "Do as he does," and the other guy nodded repeatedly, "Spot on." Both of them hastily crushed the black stone, and the system simultaneously notified them that the black stone powder had been added to their bags. Lamkiat carefully dripped each drop of herb essence into the bottle. The initial herbal extract only had a rather weak recovery effect. He continued to pour the glowstone dust in, and instantly a chemical reaction burst forth, turning the mediocre herbs into a miraculous elixir. Lamkiat stood up and headed straight towards the fountain. The best part of the show was yet to come. Gyapa wondered, why is he going to the fountain? Is he preparing to perform some high-level ritual? Octa nodded, "That's right, premium goods require a proper ritual. A fancy place like this is worthy of alchemy." He kept his eyes glued to his every move and stammered, "Wait a minute, is that what he means?" When he dipped the bottle into the fountain, the two guys stood watching, utterly dumbfounded, like they had lost their minds. After scooping up the water, the solution in the bottle instantly turned into a refreshing, pleasant green. The system pinged, signaling that a medium healing potion had been completed. Lamkiat nodded in satisfaction. "Awesome, the quality is identical to the premium stuff sold in shops." The trailing duo stood watching with doubt in their hearts. This Dobert guy must be making fake potions. The system continuously announced that batches of healing potions had been successfully and brilliantly crafted. In just the blink of an eye, Lamkiat had produced a full 100 bottles of recovery potions. At the same time, his alchemy skill level officially reached mastery. Lamkiat wiped the sweat from his forehead and smiled with satisfaction. Old knowledge indeed is a money-making treasure. Seeing the potions laid out on the ground, passers-by flocked to inquire, "Where did these potions come from? How much will you sell them to me? I've reached my purchase limit in the shop, let me buy them wholesale." An hour passed, and he smiled brightly to announce that they were completely sold out, while those who arrived late could not hide their disappointment. Lamkiat counted his money bag. Just lowering the price by 1 coin compared to the shop makes the goods fly off the shelves. Some bottles were even sold at a premium. Looking at the coin bag bulging with coins, he quickly calculated. The capital spent was a mere 100 coins, but the profit returned was tenfold in just 1 hour. Lamkiat was elated. "Griffin's reward has increased tenfold. We hit the jackpot today." Octa sighed from afar. "We guessed wrong. This Dobert guy only sells genuine premium goods." He smirked with a cunning grin, confident that this formula, obtained from a spy during the beta phase, was a blockbuster that would shake the entire market of this era. Jabba narrowed his eyes and excitedly declared that the two of them must make a fortune before the developers fixed the bug. As quick as lightning, he brewed it right away, dropping some black stone powder and a few leaves into the bottle, shaking it well, and adding a bit of water. Well, turns out alchemy is as easy as pie. As the notification panel displayed the text of successfully creating a bottle of highly toxic poison, Octa gaped and screamed. Bewildered, Jabba asked, "How strange could the formula be wrong? I clearly watched every single move closely." He held the bottle high, sputtering in defense. "No, it can't be wrong. This is definitely a healing potion. It's just that the color is a bit weird, so stop complaining." Octa pointed his finger straight at the suspicious bottle. "Then do you dare to tilt your head back and chug it all?" Instantly, a terrifying boom exploded and the system cold-heartedly announced that the player Jabba had successfully committed suicide. The crowd gathered around, pointing and gossiping. "What's that? What the hell happened? Holy crap, suicide. What a weirdo." Lin Jie sighed dejectedly to himself, thinking that if one is clueless about the formula but still insists on forcing it, they rebound to get hit by the alchemy curse, so he could only wish them better luck next time. He smiled, flipping a coin and thinking, now he had to log out of the game quickly to liquidate the money he had just made. Lin Jie held his pouch of money in his hand with a smile. With the cash out done, he logged out of the game. He returned to the cold reality of a shabby, run-down apartment. He took off his gaming helmet and breathed a sigh of relief, calculating at the exchange rate of 11,000 yuan per bronze coin. I just exchanged 50 coins on the service website before logging out of the game. His phone suddenly vibrated violently. Your account has successfully received 5 million yuan. Lin Jie smiled with satisfaction. These guys work pretty fast. Suddenly, a loud banging and crashing sound came from outside the door, making him startle and spin around. 3 debt collectors barged straight into the house muttering, "Hey, old lady, this month's debt is due for payment." The mother stammered in fear, "Isn't it supposed to be paid at the end of the month? Why are you demanding it now when it's only the beginning of the month?" The boss cursed angrily. Damn it, I could have let it slide until the end of the month, but I just wasted $1,000,000 on that piece of shit game era. He arrogantly declared, if I can squeeze any money out of your family now, where am I supposed to vent this frustration? The mother trembled and begged, I am so sorry, gentlemen. Our family is in such a tight spot right now. Could you please give us another few days or a couple of weeks? He glared and repeated the question, so that means you have no money, right? In the blink of an eye, one of the henchmen rushed over, grabbed Tich-Tich's hand tightly, and pulled her toward them. The mother rushed frantically toward her daughter, screaming Tich-Tich. But the leader grabbed her wrist and pushed her away mercilessly. He placed his hand on her shoulder and said with a sleazy grin, your daughter has really blossomed, hasn't she? Selling her virginity might fetch a huge sum of money. The leader looked up and shouted loudly, and where is that useless son of yours? Still hiding in his room with his face glued to his game, huh? What a worthless parasite. The three thugs burst into loud mocking laughter. We might as well drag him out to do manual labor, or at least sell off his spare organs to bring in a fortune. Lin Jae's cold voice suddenly sounded from behind them. $1,000,000, is that it? He tapped his finger on his phone screen while raising his head to ask, is this enough for you? The thugs burst into contemptuous laughter. This kid still likes to play the clown and pretend to be a fake rich guy, until the phone in their boss's pocket rang with a notification that he had just received $1,000,000. Stunned, the leader pulled out his phone to check, is this a scam? To which his henchman urged in confusion, boss, look at the balance update. He glanced at those people and then indifferently asked again if that was enough. Xixi cried out in panic, asking her brother if he had gone and robbed someone, while their mother anxiously pressed him on where he had gotten such a large amount of money. The leader suddenly called a halt, while his two loyal henchmen tremblingly counted each digit displayed on the screen from the tens to the hundreds of thousands. The boss stared wide-eyed at the account balance that had increased to over $1,000,000 and cursed under his breath, while his lackeys beside him also eyed the massive number with excitement. He grabbed his shirt tightly and questioned why someone who spent all day glued to a computer had such a large sum of money, while Lin Jae calmly advised his mother to go to her room to avoid the trouble. The leader roared furiously in dissatisfaction, demanding that he explain the truth about how he had earned so much money so easily. He curled his lips slightly in irony, admitting that since he was untalented, he could only rely on that pastime to accumulate wealth. He gritted his teeth, muttering bitterly that while he had worked himself into piles of debt, the boy had easily raked in millions. He pointed the tip of the knife toward the screen and loudly declared that this money was only compensation for his reputation and did not count toward the principal debt. Lin Jae's face hardened, and he asked coldly, are you planning to go back on your word? Instantly, he made his move, squeezing the opponent's wrist joint and sending the weapon flying before falling to the floor. The boss broke into a cold sweat, terrified by the lightning-fast speed of the attack. Lin Jae glanced coldly, saying that he didn't only know how to play games. With just a few basic moves, he locked the burly man down, making him cry out in pain. He groaned in pain, wondering if this was really the useless Lin Jae. Lin Jae cracked a faint smile and confirmed his identity, infuriating the two henchmen who rushed forward, threatening him to let their boss go. The terrified boss screamed at his two lackeys not to make a rash move. Trembling, he tried to compromise with flattery, begging him to loosen his grip to avoid breaking his bones. He glared and questioned who would ever want to be brothers with him. He shuddered at his opponent, thinking to himself that the oppressive aura emanating from this young man was as terrifying as a specter stepping out of the darkness. He growled menacingly, asking if they wanted to get beaten up again. He flusteredly explained that it was all an unintended misunderstanding by someone just trying to make a living, while promising that since the debt was paid off, there was no reason for either side to cause further trouble, begging him to let him go. He turned back to seek agreement from his assistants, and the other two also hurriedly nodded in rapid succession, confirming that their boss' words were absolutely correct. Lin Jae coldly ordered them to get out of there immediately. The three figures scrambled to find their way out the door, not forgetting to say a terrified goodbye as they urged each other to retreat. Lin Jae and his mother could only quietly watch their hurried retreat. Xixi confidently hugged her brother's arm and called out after them, warning them not to come anywhere near again unless they wanted to be properly punished. The three men tremblingly clasped their hands in supplication, promising never to return again. The younger sister suddenly turned to demand a satisfactory answer, leaving Lin Jae staring blankly and questioning himself. He turned around and asked curiously what his sister wanted him to explain. The little girl kept acting coy and pestering him, her mouth rambling about why a secret tycoon had suddenly appeared in their home. Lamkiet was sweating buckets, silently crying out for help. He was doomed this time, wondering how to fabricate a reason to keep his family from panicking. Seeing him hesitate and refuse to confess, his younger sister huffed and continued her interrogation, demanding he come clean about why a big shot player was hiding in their house. Watching his vibrant sister right in front of him, Lamkiet suddenly felt very lucky. Being reincarnated was truly fantastic, seeing how healthy she still was. He gradually sank into the memories of his previous life, when his father passed away and his sister fell seriously ill, with debts piling up so high he couldn't shoulder his family's burdens. Clutching a stack of job applications, Lam Kiat dragged himself from one interview to another, not skipping a single company. Unfortunately, he only reaped bitter results as the chorus of rejections rang out steadily. Go home and wait for the notification. We'll contact you if a suitable position opens up later. Those consecutive days of failure left him severely depressed. Finding a job was harder than climbing to heaven, and an unknown nobody like him had no chance of getting his foot in the door. At his wit's end, he accidentally ran into a staff member handing out flyers for a brand new game titled New Era. The employee shoved the advertisement into his hand, describing a vast, endless virtual world with countless treasures waiting for gamers to explore. A single enticing sentence from the staff member suddenly revived hope within Lam Kiat. Playing this genre can rake in millions, kid. That was the opening shot for the days that followed. Looking back, the reason for entering this world sounded a bit silly at first, but ultimately it all stemmed from desperation and poverty. While Lam Kiat was standing in a corner deep in thought, someone shouted out to him, "Hey, you obscure warrior over there." He whipped his head around to find an alliance boss recruiting. "We need someone reckless who knows no fear. Do you have the guts to join us?" He gestured wildly while negotiating with Lam Kiat. "Let's see a real performance. Your compensation will be a measly 2 small coins." In his destitute state, Lam Kiat nodded in agreement immediately upon hearing about money without a second thought. "Count me in. I am not afraid of anything." From then on, every battle was a gamble with his life. In return, as long as he survived, he had money to spend. After many life and death encounters, the commander had to exclaim, "Uriah's hard to kill as a leech, Lam Kiat." He gave him a long, sidelong glance. "Every single time I see you crawl back intact, maybe there's some shady business or cheating going on here." Lam Kiat sat flat on the ground with countless wounds all over his body, hearing that he could only look up to the sky in speechless frustration. The commander tilted his chin and tossed down the payment pouch. "Since I see you working so hard, here's a bonus of 1 extra coin." Then he turned and walked away arrogantly, saying, "From now on, remember to contribute enthusiastically." Lam Kiat stood frozen in place, watching the commander's figure disappear, his hands tightly gripping the few meager coins he had just received. After a period of being battered through high-stakes life or death gambles, his combat skills gradually reached a state of mastery. In later campaigns, even if the entire team was wiped out, he stubbornly survived until the very end, sometimes even taking on massive bosses alone. And so, as his expertise reached new heights, he began to harbor greater ambitions, determined to climb to the position of the most dominant gamer solely through his pure skill. He marched proudly through all hardships and battles to slay generals and seize flags, advancing straight down the path toward reaching the pinnacle of being invincible under heaven. Most importantly, on that thorny journey, he simultaneously earned a fortune and was able to protect his most beloved ones. Lam Kiat vowed to himself to become the strongest matchless fighter, and he eventually befriended loyal comrades who shared his vision, specifically Bachlai. The duo of Lam Kiat and Bachlai officially clicked from then on. They both swore to use their true strength to dominate the professional throne, and then both roared in challenge to each other in the middle of a fierce battle, as one shouted, "Let's have a match to see who is truly superior," while the other smirked and replied, "I'll give you a head start." The crowd below buzzed with excitement. "Oh, isn't he that Lam Kiat, the undefeated god of war? Only the toughest life or death battles can invite him to participate. I have witnessed his fighting style before. It's not something an ordinary person could achieve. He is truly a monster." It is hard to believe that a warrior from the lowest class could make it into the top 10 of the strategy rankings, a list full of high-profile figures. Thanks to his past victories, his earnings have skyrocketed, helping his family overcome their financial crisis. And then, on a special occasion, the high-level matchmaker spoke up, "In this match, you must lose." Hearing this, Lam Kiat was furious. He slammed his hand on the table, snapped his head up, and asked, "Why can't I win?" He felt extremely confused. "Clearly, I have enough strength to compete for the highest position. I also dream of becoming the strongest, standing at the peak of this era." Lam Kiat said in confusion, "Whatever you say, as long as I win this final match, I will receive a 100 million reward, which is enough to treat my sister immediately." He looked straight at the high-level matchmaker and asked loudly, "On what basis do I have to lose?" He began to explain, "The ultimate competition of this era is actually a game controlled by money. A commoner like you can never stand against the rising star set up by the capitalists, so you must lose. Moreover, your opponent, Ao, is none other than your close friend, Bachlai Truongthan. Losing to him can be seen as helping him achieve his goal," he added slowly. Lam Kiat turned around sharply and replied firmly, "Bachlai will never betray our promise. He understands why I became a warrior, so I must fight with all my might." He was extremely determined. "I must become the strongest, defeat everything, and beat Bachlai Truongthan." In his heart, Lam Kiat always understood that as a commoner who dreamed of using his strength to change his destiny, continuing on this path was the right choice. The high-level matchmaker shouted from behind him, "Even if you refuse to throw the match, the capitalists will find every way to make you lose." He tried to advise him, instead of falling from the peak, why not take this opportunity to withdraw? But Lam Kiat knew he could not back down. "Bachlai, that kid, comes from an extraordinary background. No matter how many times he falls, he will always have a chance to get back up. But for commoners like me, once we fall, we can never stand up again. You don't have a second chance. Suddenly Lam Kiet's phone rang. He picked up. Hello mom, what's wrong? News like a bolt from the blue struck him. Tich, my daughter. The hospital notified us that her life support equipment suddenly malfunctioned and her condition is worsening severely. I don't know what to do anymore. The phone slipped from his hand, but the voice still echoed, accept defeat Kiet. A person dressed in black at the hospital told me so. At that moment Lam Kiet seemed to lose all his strength. He collapsed, covering his face as he sobbed, my sister. Returning to reality, that memory made him shed tears involuntarily. Tich asked in confusion, brother, are you crying? Seeing her worry, he quickly wiped his tears and gave a bright smile to encourage her. Why would I cry, you silly girl? I'm obviously laughing because I'm so happy. Tich sensed her brother's unusual behavior. Brother, you are so strange today, crying one moment and laughing the next. Can playing games really earn 100 gold taels? Lam Kiet started to make up a story. Yeah, because I was lucky enough to open a mysterious chest. An item of equipment can be sold for an astronomical price. We are going to have a good life. Hearing this, the little girl was extremely excited. Oh, is there really such a good thing? Bring the helmet here and let me play too. Lam Kiet did not expect things to turn out this way and quickly spoke up in concern. Minors are banned from playing games. In this competition, when it comes to the reasons for becoming a player, everyone has their own stories to tell. Among the goals to overcome life or death battles, some do it for honor, while others do it for their dreams. Those battles are by no means easy, and some simply want to escape from reality. Standing in the midst of battle, Lam Kiet thought to himself, as for me, the reason is extremely simple, to become the strongest. People often observe that those at the lowest level of society are incredibly resilient, born having to risk their lives to earn a living, just like monsters, always able to survive in the most difficult and dangerous situations. Being one of those from the lower class, Lam Kiet understood one thing very well, though they remain unaware of it, behind those miracles. For those people and for him as well, there is a driving reason to survive, to become the strongest, to be the last survivor, and to protect their most loved ones. That is the reason he became a player. Returning to reality, Lam Kiet realized, but in this life, to become the strongest, I need to buy a few things first. The scene shifts to another location, the official authorized store of Era, Dimensional Boundary. Stepping into the store, Lam Kiet stood quietly in front of an extremely expensive counter. Looking at that pile of items, he suddenly remembered his days of poverty, when it took so much sweat and tears just to buy something far inferior to this, and thinking back made him feel discouraged. Clearly seeing the night and day difference between the two sides, he muttered to himself that this guy must have acquired the entire high-end Supreme Thunder set ages ago. The owner caught sight of Lam Kiet and immediately gave a forced but welcoming smile. Oh, it's you, little brother. How have things been? Was that beginner set not to your liking? Is that why you've stopped by? He looked straight into the shop owner's eyes and confidently declared, I want to buy this Supreme Thunder set right away for my team. The man gasped in astonishment upon hearing this. What set? The Supreme Thunder. Honestly, those epic items are only for high-level, big-spending grinders, you know. He then began lecturing, it's good for youth to have ambitions, but don't overrate yourself. Even if you grind for another 10 years, I'm afraid you won't even get to touch its edge. Suddenly, a guy aggressively marched over, slammed the table, and said, Supreme Thunder, huh? Swipe my card and pay for it right now. As soon as he saw this straightforward spender, the owner immediately switched to full-on sycophant mode. Welcome, Master Rick. It's a pleasure to have you here. You truly have excellent taste. This Supreme Thunder set is the only exclusive one in the entire city, born specifically for a true high roller like you. Lam Kiet caught a glimpse of Rick's face and secretly groaned inside. Hearing this flattering tone, this guy must be a very wealthy regular customer. Instantly, the duo Mikey and Archer standing right behind disgruntledly chimed in, oh, come on. Just the other day you got totally wrecked by that bastard Lam Kiet. Hearing his embarrassing defeat mentioned, Rick immediately whipped around and argued heatedly, if it weren't for that trashy gear holding me back, I would have turned him to ash long ago. Just then, his gaze swept across and caught Lam Kiet standing frozen and annoyed right beside him, his mouth agape and eyes wide with shock. Snapping back to his senses, he shrieked in utter panic, oh my god, Lam Kiet, why do I run into this nemesis of mine everywhere I go? He calmly glanced sideways with clear contempt, it's a small world. What did I warn you before going to bed? Do you want to take another severe beating? Sweat beaded on his forehead, but Rick still strained his neck to argue back. It seems that loss in the game still hasn't made you wake up, huh? Fine, just you wait. Then, he suddenly regained his confidence upon realizing this hard reality. He had forgotten that this was real life, not virtual reality where young Master Rick was more influential and powerful than anyone else. Behind him, Mikey blankly reminded him, boss, this line sounds familiar. I think you used it back in Meltdown. Archer nodded in agreement, adding spot on, the exact same script. He quickly made excuses to save some of his empty pride. It's because this guy played dirty and used hacks in the game that we slipped up. Now in real life, let's see how he handles a 3-on-1 fight. Seeing the situation turn tense, the shop owner, sweating profusely, quickly jumped in to intervene. Hold on, big bosses. Please don't start a fight here. Making a living through daily business is very hard for me, sirs. He turned to glare at him and advised, Lam Kiet, don't be foolish enough to talk back to young Master Rick. Quickly kneel and beg for forgiveness. If the items in the shop get broken, you won't be able to pay for them even if you sell your house. Lam Kiat sighed warily. Separate the game from real life, will you? Initially, I was going to be merciful and let you guys off the hook. His pride trampled on, Rick flew into a raging frenzy. Damn you, go to hell. Today I must wipe away the humiliation from the game no matter what. The duo Mikey and Archer were also flushed with anger, gritting their teeth. Damn it. Do you know how much effort we spent to grind to that level? How dare you make us drop in rank? With those words, Rick brandished a knife and rushed straight at him with overwhelming murderous intent. Cut the crap. Pay with your life, you dog, Lam Kiat. Silently observing the man rushing toward him, a strange and sharp gleam suddenly flashed in the depths of his eyes. In that brief split second, Lam Kiat could clearly feel the surrounding space suddenly passing by with unusual slowness. It turned out that 5 years of life and death struggle in the Tula Purgatory era had forged his will of steel, pushing his neural reflex speed and muscle reaction to a whole new level. As a result of this supreme evolution, when entering battle, his vision automatically activated a time-slowing effect just like a slow-motion movie. And at this very moment in real life the same thing happened. Lam Kiat gently slipped aside, narrowly evading Rick's devastating stab by a hair's breadth. Missing his stab, the man stood frozen in place, utterly bewildered and questioning his own reality. Holy crap. Is it possible to cheat and hack speed in real life as well? Without giving Rick a chance to breathe, Lam Kiat unleashed a powerful punch straight at him. The strike, both swift and vicious, instantly made his opponent see a sky full of stars. He wailed in pain, his face covered in tears and snot, looking absolutely miserable. Lam Kiat looked down from above, thinking there is no room for cheating in real life, brother. He then turned toward Mikey and Achayat, saying, I still have plenty of time, both of you should come at me together. Seeing this, both of them cowardly ran straight away, abandoning their teammate, and shouted, Boss, you go ahead, we'll wait for you at the old spot. Lam Kiat didn't even bother to argue, casually tossing the card onto the counter and telling the shopkeeper, charge me for this supreme lightning weapon as well. The old shopkeeper's eyes widened in surprise at his generosity, wondering if such a large amount of money was a joke, to which he calmly replied that his balance was more than enough to cover it. Once the transaction was complete, the owner enthusiastically escorted his guest to the door, smiling widely and saying he hoped to see him again next time. While carrying his newly purchased weapon on the street, Lam Kiat accidentally ran into a familiar face. It turned out to be Hat, whose face instantly paled with sheer terror upon seeing him. Noticing him standing there like a statue, Lam Kiat asked, earlier inside, why didn't you follow your teammate's lead and charge at me too? He trembled so hard that his whole body froze, barely stuttering out a few disconnected words like I. Struggling to speak, Hat panicked to the point of sweating profusely, mumbles stuttering, I didn't he want. Then, without thinking, he suddenly knelt down and bowed to Lam Kiat, pleading, please, accept me. Surprised by this scene, he stared at the man kneeling on the ground and gasped in astonishment. Hat continued to introduce himself, I am Hat, a retribution knight, please accept me, my lord. Having said that, he hesitated for a moment before raising his head to beg, please take me as your disciple. Hearing this, Lam Kiat only smirked, turned his back and walked away, saying I have absolutely no interest in taking on a disciple. Having come this far, Hat was determined to persist to the end, saying, please wait and listen to me. From the moment I met you that day, I saw you as a god of war stepping out of death. Holding onto Lam Kiat's leg tightly, he continued, from then on I realized a truth that you are indeed incredibly strong. He tearfully poured his heart out, the reason I chose the fiery domain talent is solely due to my cowardly nature, fearing danger, injury, and the burden of responsibility. Confessing everything, he sadly admitted that he had hidden his weakness behind a flashy but useless talent. Having been through many fierce battles, even Hat had to admit that he was just a pathetic loser. Now he longed for change. I want to become strong, fair and square, to gain overwhelming power like yours. So please accept me as your disciple. Lam Kiat still firmly refused. Unfortunately, I have no plans to take on any disciples right now, while thinking to himself that this fool still didn't understand the situation. Right after that, he helped Hat stand up and calmly said, but as for the future, who knows? A gleam of hope suddenly flashed in his eyes. My lord, what you just said means you're not completely turning me down, right? Watching Hat's back as he jumped for joy, he thought to himself that when someone recognizes their own weakness, that is when they start to become strong. He turned back and smiled, announcing the era is updating and version 101 is coming out soon. Wait until then and I will observe your performance before making a decision. He clenched his fists with determination, resolved to use time to assert his ability and prove he was worthy of becoming Dobert's disciple. Lam Kiat smiled as he stepped forward. The wheel of fate had now turned completely differently from his previous life, making tiny variables more unpredictable than ever. Lam Kiat leisurely put the gaming helmet on his head, his eyes shining with hard-to-conceal excitement. Upon activation, the device immediately glowed brilliantly and launched the system's familiar login interface. In the blink of an eye, his consciousness was immersed in the vast and nostalgic world of the game. Standing silently in front of the familiar house, Lam Kiat frowned slightly. Since receiving the key from Mayor Green, he had never set foot here. Perhaps after this update, the system had automatically set his respawn point at his private home. Pushing the door open to step inside, he breathed a sigh of relief and said, I am back. Instantly, the system voice rang in his ears. Welcome back, Lord Dobard. The latest update has officially unlocked the home renovation feature. The monotonous voice continued to echo through the quiet space. You have the right to refurbish the house as you wish, and the entire area within a 500-meter radius here has been set as your personal domain by default. The mechanical voice continued to explain, the higher your reputation in the era, the greater your land privileges. Lam Kiet was stunned because he didn't expect the game to have this hidden feature. In his previous life, he didn't even have a house to know about it. Scanning the empty room, he could only shake his head and sigh. Living here would be no different from sleeping on the street. After a moment of weighing the pros and cons, Lam Kiet decided to spend generously to purchase all the necessary items. Lam Kiet could not help grumbling, so the generous mayor gave me an empty shell of a house, just waiting for me to burn through all my savings on renovations. This amount of money would be more than enough to buy a luxury villa. He really is a cunning business fox. Pondering for a few seconds, Lam Kiet frowned slightly and said, all right, then. Taking a broad look at the entire house, he nodded with satisfaction. It looks pretty decent. If the money is spent in the right place, I can easily earn it back later. Just as he finished his thought, a steady knock at the door suddenly shattered the quiet atmosphere. With a hint of caution in his heart, Lam Kiet slowly walked toward the front door to check. Stopping in front of the doorway, he narrowed his eyes and asked, who's outside? Helene stood there with her familiar faint smile, softly replying, hello, Lord Dobard. Seeing that familiar face, his intuition told him that trouble was coming. Leaning against the doorframe, she curled her lips in a suggestive smile. We can be considered old friends, so why not welcome your guest more warmly? Facing that dangerous smile, Lam Kiet secretly stayed on guard. Helene was the boss of the underworld in the small town, and getting involved with her was never a wise choice. Recalling memories from his previous life in this game, those who specialized in hunting other players and became red names usually had their movement restricted in public areas. Crossing his arms and observing silently, he suddenly recalled some interesting information. An underworld NPC like Helene often recruited these people to provide them with shelter services. Lam Kiet's eyes turned cold as he remembered Helene's reputation. Of course, there was a fee, and the people who sought her out were all undesirable characters. Maintaining a mysterious smile, she leisurely continued, I have a highly profitable deal for you. He immediately looked suspicious and refused. This is the first time I've seen an NPC proactively offer a deal. I'm not interested, thanks. As soon as the words left his mouth, Helene naturally pushed the door open and walked in. In this town, apart from you, no one is qualified to do this quest. She casually slumped down on the sofa, slowly explaining, a lair of man-eating demonic beasts has just appeared in the land to the west of the town. Hearing this, Lam Kiet raised his eyebrows in surprise and asked, is it that serious? Helene's eyes darkened with a flash of murderous intent. That beast is too strong, my henchmen have all been devoured by it, which is why I need someone with enough capability to deal with it. After hearing the whole story, the male protagonist clasped his hands in contemplation and calmly asked if her soldiers had only been operating around the town until now, and why they had suddenly ventured all the way to West Wind Ridge to throw their lives away. She immediately pouted and replied curtly, this young lady does business by the rules and doesn't ask too many questions. You just need to accept the job or not. The listed price is 100 copper coins. Hearing that meager amount, Lin Jie snatched the apple from Helene's hand and bluntly announced, 10 silver coins. Suddenly having her food stolen, the woman glared with hostility and shouted, how dare you demand such a rip-off price? 10 silver coins is 10,000 copper coins, 100 times more, you greedy bastard. Taking a bite of the crispy apple, he calmly said, since the customer came to my door herself, the price is up to me. 10 silver coins is the value of this deal. Hearing this, Helene sneered, crossed her arms, and said sarcastically, for that astronomical amount of money, I could hire a dozen top-tier players in town to do it instead. Why should I bother with a nuisance like you? Lin Jie's gaze suddenly grew razor-sharp. Gonna all the trouble to find me here means there's definitely a hidden motive. If you keep hiding it, let me guess it for you. Seeing this, the other party raised an eyebrow in amusement and taunted, that sounds thrilling. If you're so smart, why don't you try to guess? A chain of analysis immediately sprang to mind. The treasure Helene hid at Westwind Ridge was actually a hidden dungeon, which had been completely overrun by monsters after the major update. Casually spinning the apple, Lin Jie looked straight into Helene's eyes and said flatly, you want to launder the looted money, but unfortunately, you can find an expert capable of clearing out the nest. Catching her slight hesitation, he dealt a fatal psychological blow. The gold you scraped together in that heist definitely doesn't stop at 10 silver coins. At the very least, it must be hundreds of gold coins along with countless rare treasures. Hearing this, her expression shifted wildly, her eyes filled with panic. How do you know this so well? You're clearly just a novice who just entered the trade. In the face of her murderous gaze, Lin Jie only sneered inwardly, I am a reincarnator returned from the dead. What secret of the NPCs on this earth have I not already held in my hand? Recalling the horrific memories of the past, his eyes involuntarily dimmed. In his previous life, Helene's treasure had triggered a chain of treasure hunt quests that shook the entire server, and he had been a part of it. But unfortunately, that only happened after the small town of Mel had been wiped out in its infancy. Remembering that dark future, a gray sorrow flashed in Lin Jie's eyes. Back then, Helian had slipped down a path of error, slaughtering countless innocent people, only to meet a tragic end at the hands of the Subjugation Alliance. The name Helian of the Street of Shadows eventually faded into obscurity as a sad memory of the old era. After a few seconds of quiet contemplation, he suddenly looked up, staring directly at her, and delivered each word firmly. But now I want to renegotiate this deal. What if I report this interesting story to Town Mayor Ring? The corners of Lin Jae's mouth curled into a dangerous smile as he began to tighten the psychological trap. Do you think the name Helian of the Street of Shadows will survive past the next update? Receiving such an explicit threat, she sneered coldly and replied with arrogance. What makes that old man think he can meddle in my territory? Hearing the astronomical price just offered, Helian frowned with painful reluctance and lamented, 10 silver coins that have grown roots and horns like this. Someone who loves money as much as I do absolutely cannot afford it. Observing her rapidly changing expression, he suddenly burst out laughing and casually proposed, seeing how incredibly greedy you are, I'll do this job for free. Faced with this sharp turn of an answer, Helian's eyes widened in astonishment and her jaw dropped. What? You're really not charging a single penny? Are you joking or serious? Lin Jae's gaze suddenly became terrifyingly serious. The condition is that you must abandon this godforsaken corner called the Street of Shadows. In his heart, he thought with emotion that the boundary between good and evil is just a single thought apart, and humans or NPC are no different. Recalling the moment they first met, deep emotions welled up in Lin Jae's heart. Meeting Helian for the first time, I saw that she was completely different from the impression in my memory. Her story was actually just a tragic low note amidst the chaotic symphony of the game. Memories of the great battle from years ago suddenly rushed back into his mind. The day the small town of Mel fell was also the moment the tyrant Griffin rose to power and ruled over everything. Lin Jae's face turned ice cold as he remembered that painful ending. Town Mayor Green was brutally murdered, while Helian crawled in surrender to the evil executioner Griffin, eventually becoming a powerful henchwoman for the dark faction. An indescribable feeling of bitterness suddenly filled his chest, and he stood in silence, lost in a mess of thoughts. She had once harbored a naive belief in human nature, only to turn that disappointment into a blade of vengeance, letting hatred gnaw at her heart until she transformed into an absolute demon, ultimately ending her life in a pool of blood. Looking up at Helian with a completely different gaze, Lin Jae unconsciously sighed to himself. But in this new life, he was lucky enough to discover a hidden corner of this stubborn NPC that had never been revealed. In those fading memories, she had once proudly stood amidst the crowd and coldly shouted, "Come on, guys. Let him taste the special welcome of the Street of Shadows." Helian reached up to wipe the trickle of blood from the corner of her mouth and laughed mockingly. "I have to admit, your skills are pretty tough. We've been fighting for so long and I still haven't been able to bring you down." As soon as she finished speaking, she threw a shiny object straight at him with a mischievous smile. "A meeting gift for you. No need to be polite. I hope we will cooperate well in the journey ahead, Lord Blade." Recalling Helian's boiling enthusiasm of the past, Lin Jae smiled with silent satisfaction. After all, she was just a person who used to get incredibly excited by pure battles. Perhaps this time the wheel of fate would be readjusted to take a brighter path. As soon as she heard the tricky request, her expression changed and she lowered her voice, saying that there was no such thing. He quickly activated his eyes of truth to investigate, and thus all of Xia Lion's secrets appeared clearly thanks to the ability to expose the NPC's lies. Xia Lion grit her teeth in frustration and scolded him, saying that this bastard dared to use her own gift to probe her back. Lin Jae leisurely delivered the verdict that those treasures were too important to someone like Xia Lion of the Shadow Street, so much so that even if she had to sacrifice everything, she had to get them back. Hearing that, she drew her sword, pointed it straight at his face, and coldly declared that she had always respected this lord. Facing the gleaming sharp blade, Lin Jae still calmly replied that this was his home turf, so she had better show some respect, because only he could help her reclaim that item. Hearing this, Xia Lian had no choice but to sheathe her sword and confessed that her life savings were enough for her to enjoy her retirement if she retired from the Black Blade. So she had to entrust this life or death mission to him. Lin Jae held his forehead and sighed heavily, blaming himself for being foolish enough to take on a job without pay like this. He sighed mournfully, telling himself that he must have had his head squeezed by a door in the past to be so muddled now. The system interface flashed once and immediately displayed a notification that the mission had been successfully accepted. After a few swipes on the virtual screen, Xia Lion casually announced that the target coordinates had already been pinned on his map. Lin Jae immediately stretched his hand forward and loudly demanded his reward. She raised her eyebrows in confusion with a surprised look, wondering what tricks this guy was trying to play when he had just claimed to do it for free. He casually brought up a weapon reward in a brief sentence, making Xia Lion blink and ask what kind of weapon it was. Recalling the unlucky scene from the previous day, Lin Jae crossed his arms and irritably reminded her of the time she used a single slash to break his precious sword. Only then did Xia Lian slowly draw out her weapon and introduce it as the night-roaming demon. Eyeing the extremely long saber that could be held with both hands, he thought to himself that this weapon was not much different from a sword to him. Casually swinging it a few times in the air, Lin Jie silently assessed that Xie Lian's weapon felt much heavier and more solid in hand than it appeared. In the very next split second, the detailed status board along with a series of special effects of the weapon appeared clearly before his eyes. Excitedly testing a few basic moves, he easily sliced through a huge tree branch that fell backward ahead of him. Lin Jie muttered that if it weren't for Xie Lian's pre-marked map, he would probably have spent the whole day trying to find his way in here. Sensing an unusual killing intent in the air, he immediately took a defensive stance and stayed on guard, guessing that the mysterious monster had already arrived. Right at that moment, a huge, ferocious wild boar suddenly emerged from the dense grass right in front of him. Looking up at the shifting stats above the monster's head, Lin Jie curled his lips and called it a level 1 imperial boar. Indifferently glancing at the growling beast, he sneered and said that in this era game world, such a creature was nothing more than an appetizer. However, at that very moment, a giant tail suddenly swept across the sky right above Lin Jie's head. Spotting the dark shadow that had just glided past the clouds, his heart pounded wildly in sheer terror. Lin Jie's eyes contracted in panic as he looked up at the sky, crying out in his mind that it was impossible and made no sense. Feeling a heavy pressure weighing down on his shoulders, he gripped the hilt of the blade tightly and wondered why that thing was appearing in this place. Lin Jie unconsciously muttered the word dragon, and at that moment, the cold voice of the system rang in his ears, announcing that the level 8 Black Dragon Zodiac had been detected, while reminding him that the master's current level was only 2. Zodiac looked down from above with a contemptuous gaze, his ice-cold voice echoing that foolish humans actually dared to delude themselves with thoughts of an extraordinary destiny and challenge him, which was utterly ridiculous. From the comms screen on the other side, Halian's voice suddenly rang out with delight, asking if he had already encountered his opponent and noting his fast pace, making him angrily yell back asking if she meant to send him to his death by bringing him here. Lam Kiat gnashed his teeth and replied that a boss of this caliber required a coordinated team of at least 5 people to handle. But she nonchalantly responded that the difficulty increased with the number of players, so if he couldn't handle it, bringing in more people would only make matters worse. Halian soaked in the hot bath and laughed as she looked at the screen, repeating Xiao Calaman's words that he had fought him one-on-one before, and that his skill level far surpassed those useless level 4 or 5 players. Lam Kiat gradually realized a serious anomaly, as monsters around the starter town shouldn't exceed level 4, and even the griffin was below level 5, the appearance of a level 8 black dragon was definitely an error. Hearing him ramble incessantly, she merely mocked him, saying that since he had defeated that griffin dragon by himself before, he would surely find a way to manage. Gripping the saber in his hand, Lam Kiat frowned and refuted helplessly that this was a difference of 6 whole levels. And Guyan Zhang added that this was a gap that a player with supreme mechanical skill could completely bridge. Zodiac's voice suddenly echoed with a cold, imposing authority, declaring that since the intruder had set foot in his lair, he would grant him 2 choices, either be utterly obliterated until not even ashes remained. In an extraordinarily arrogant tone, it slowly continued that it was also willing to bestow a special favor by adding him to its ranks of servants, as long as he knelt down right there and sang the praises of Zodiac. Faced with the flamboyant threat, Lam Kiat only smirked and replied that he had no interest, and that he had only come here to remind him that he seemed to be illegally occupying someone else's home. Hearing this, it instantly flew into a rage, its golden eyes blazing with murderous intent, as it roared that he was extremely bold to dare touch the treasure that rightfully belonged to Zodiac. He silently marveled in his heart that the game era had thoroughly exploited human biases regarding arrogance and slavery to money, and even Halian's Shadow Street was no exception. Enraged, Zodiac roared fiercely and bellowed to prepare for deserving punishment, while at the same time a system notification announced that Black Dragon Zodiac had locked onto him as its target. Lam Kiat began to feel the severity of the situation because in his past life, even when he had reached level 3, it still took an 8-person team to take down a dragon of the same level. He silently analyzed the situation in his mind, noting that the attribute difference between level 2 and level 3 in era was nearly double, so even with his mechanical experience from his past life, it would still be extremely difficult. Gripping the hilt of his saber, Lam Kiat contemplated seriously that his current body was still far too weak for the demands of this fight. He let out a helpless sigh. Halian, you really set me up big time this time. Right at that precise moment, Lam Kiat dodged like lightning, avoiding a devastating attack coming down from the dragon. In the midst of battle, his mind remained crystal clear as he analyzed that the black dragon usually had 4 skill attacks: fire breath, clawing, biting, and tail sweep, and any direct hit would be enough to send him straight to his grave. Zodiac roared in fury again, you humans are so insolent to dare challenge my supreme authority. He silently memorized every single movement of his opponent. Every attack had a flaw. When breathing out, it would tilt its head back to inhale, and when sweeping its tail, it had to brace itself firmly on its front 2 legs. Staring intently at Zodiac, Lam Kiat focused deeply, thinking that when preparing to bite, it would lower its body slightly backward before opening its jaws and lunging forward. Quickly simulating the battle flow in his mind, he further analyzed that the fan-shaped claw attack would leave an opening half a second after execution. Recognizing its previous movement, Lam Kiet's eyes suddenly lit up as half a second had passed since it used its claws. Not missing this golden opportunity, he immediately tightened his grip on the saber's hilt. This was the prime moment to strike back. Right after, Lam Kiet lunged forward like a flash of lightning, swinging the Night Ghost saber with full force straight at his target. Caught off guard by the sudden counterattack, it roared with murderous intent, "You damned human." Looking at the giant jaws lunging toward him, Lam Kiet's expression changed drastically as he realized it was a bite attack, and there was no way to retreat. In that moment of dire emergency, he immediately activated his defensive skill and shouted, "Griffiness Golden Bell." Instantly, a brilliant golden glow suddenly burst forth, enveloping Lam Kiet's entire body. Taking full advantage of that defensive moment, he followed up with a counterattack that forced Zodiac to retreat. Seeing the glittering light enveloping his opponent, the monster roared in shock. What kind of devilish trick is this? Panting heavily after the clash, Lam Kiet wiped the fresh blood from the corner of his mouth and muttered, "That almost cost me my little life. If I can T-pierce that armor, how can I win? I have to rack my brain to think of another plan." Zodiac laughed mockingly. "It seems like that tattered toy of yours is useless now. What a piece of trash." Lam Kiet immediately recognized the destructive move called the Sweeping Dragon's Breath. The flame attack spread out in an ultra-wide fan shape, and evading it head-on would only turn him into ash. His eyes narrowed in thought. When facing a dragon, everyone wants to keep their distance, but the further back you go, the wider the damage range of the dragon's breath becomes. That would only make for a quicker suicide. Keeping his eyes fixed on the giant shadow in front of him, Lam Kiet's eyes suddenly flashed with coldness. What is a truly safe distance then? With that, he flew forward like the wind, weapon in hand, ready to deliver a fatal blow. Real combat would provide the answer. Zodiac's jaw dropped as he roared in bewilderment. How could anyone be so fast? He couldn't believe a level 2 novice could possess such terrifying speed. Taking advantage of the evil dragon's confusion, Lam Kiet channeled all the strength in his arms to slash the Dedue Kwai sword straight down. He clicked his tongue in extreme dissatisfaction. Such a high-quality weapon, yet it couldn't even scratch the itch. Its massive tail didn't budge at all after that downward hack. Zodiac laughed boastfully and roared, "To think you could slash through these sturdy dragon scales is absolutely ridiculous. I thought too highly of a nobody like you." Right at the crucial moment, a panicked voice came from the other end of the line. "Damn, I almost forgot to tell you. The soul inside the sword is a bit cowardly when meeting strangers." Receiving the late information like a slap to the face, Lam Kiet grimaced and grumbled, "Such shocking secret news, and you're only spilling it now." He immediately noticed something unusual about the hilt. This divine weapon seemed to have its own soul. If the master did not catch its eye, it was nothing more than a piece of scrap metal. Lam Kiet's face grew pensive as he hastily asked how to unlock it. "So how on earth do I get it to submit?" The voice on the other end nonchalantly gave the answer. "You have to show it the capability of someone who has danced on the brink of death." He thought about the bizarre challenges he had conquered before. He had encountered all kinds of weird conditions, but when it came to risking his life and being half dead, it was right up his alley. Standing at the edge of danger, Lam Kiet slightly curled his lips into a proud smile. "When it comes to this, just call me the final boss." Seeing the glowing red embers begin to gather in the beast's throat, he immediately grew as tense as a guitar string. That super flame sweep is coming again. Just as Zodiac unleashed a terrifying firestorm, Lam Kiet spun and glided away with incredible skill. Skillfully weaving through the searing, skin-burning sparks, he wisely steered closer to its range of action. Highly focused, he aimed straight at the dragoness throat and calculated to himself, "The fatal weakness is right there, 3 inches below the neck." Spotting the glittering, reflective reverse scale, he cheered excitedly to himself, "That's the spot." Having just closed into the optimal range, Lam Kiet channeled all his strength into the blade of the Dedue Kwai and roared, "Die." Sensing an ill omen, the evil dragon immediately flapped its wings frantically and retreated to save its life. Zodiac laughed mockingly again. "What shallow humans. Do you really think that little illusion can defeat this king?" Although the slash missed, he still managed to land firmly, maintaining his balance amidst the thick smoke and dust of the battle. Looking up at the monster proudly flapping its wings high above, Lam Kiet could only scratch his head in exasperation. "Oh my god, I completely forgot that this big guy has wings." Immediately, he activated the auxiliary skill, immensely increasing his grip strength. Helena's face changed dramatically as she warned, "It was fine the previous times, but this is a dragon's breath. With your current protective gear and flesh, you will definitely be obliterated." Lam Kiet appeared completely composed as he tightly gripped the hilt of the demon blade, thinking to himself that this weapon seemed to only submit to the brave. A searing stream of flames began to gather in the dragon's mouth, preparing for another devastating onslaught. An arrogant smile appeared on the young man's lips despite his precarious situation, wondering what this precious blade could achieve. Lam Kiet's eyes suddenly hardened with murderous intent, thinking to himself that the creature must be used to being revered as a supreme being. The young man decisively lunged forward with soaring majesty, confident that he was a destroyer who had just returned from the dead. Right at that moment, the system's mechanical voice suddenly announced the successful activation of the hidden skill called armor piercing. Without a second of hesitation, he stomped the ground to gain momentum and launched himself straight at the target. Her mind surged with horror, unable to believe that this guy could unleash such a massive amount of energy so quickly. Facing the unusual killing intent from his opponent, Dark Jody's heart swelled with extreme anxiety, never expecting such a weak creature to pose such a great threat. The creature roared frantically in anger, "Lowly human, by what right do you dare to fight me?" Its golden pupils burned with hatred as the beast continued to roar fiercely. "I will hack you to pieces to punish this insolent arrogance." Lam Kiet's mind worked at full capacity to assess the situation. He realized his current skill was highly optimal, and if he closed in for an overwhelming fight and channeled all his power, the chance of winning would be very high. The monster laughed mockingly. In the end, the foolish mortal still chose the stupidest way to commit suicide. Spreading its massive wings in the sky, Zodiac looked down arrogantly. "By flying up here yourself, you have stripped away your only chance of survival, which was to dodge." Facing the overwhelming killing intent in the air, he still kept a cool head, knowing that a single slip up while jumping would be enough to break his body into pieces. Feeling the searing hot air closing in, Lam Kiet silently calculated that the line between life and death was now measured in split seconds. There was not a shred of wavering or fear in his mind. On the contrary, he had a strong belief that he would execute the perfect strike without any hesitation. Lam Kiet concentrated intensely to channel all his vital energy into the decisive blow, his hands gripping the sword tightly, his breath rapid and burning, pouring all the essence of his long accumulated will into a single slash. Witnessing the small mortal bravely rushing forward without flinching, Zodiac let out a savage roar. "Go to hell, you filthy insect." His eyes remained steadfast without a trace of hesitation. In this world full of deception, this was the only thing he dared to bet his life on. Amidst the billowing sea of fire high in the sky, Lam Kiet wore a determined smile facing this decisive gamble. Just before the two forces collided, he had absolute confidence in his own ability. Victory was the only option, and there was no other outcome.